What was that incident during Thanksgiving? When the lights flickered off for a second and Grandma said, "Do you think it's the Muslims?" I had a moment like this with my sweet, polite, lovely, warm grandmother who liked everyone and everyone liked my grandmother to me as we walked past a broken bottle. "Be careful and don't step on that N-word with a hard-R knife." Me. Wait, what? My grandmother ran over herself with her SUV and X200B. I was on my way to the festivities when it happened, so I don't know the exact details, but she was getting out food from the back of her SUV, put it in neutral instead of park, and it slowly ran her over. The craziest part is that my family all inside didn't notice until they heard a bump against the house. The SUV made 3 loops before hitting the house. She ended up being fine but now isn't allowed to go outside alone anymore on holidays. This story is now a grandma moment in our family. Ah, yes, I remember that Christmas song. Grandma got ran over by an SUV. Oh shit. My mom dominated the conversation about how everyone should be drinking their pee for a solid 45 minutes. She read in some yoga book about how it cures some infection called body belly that you get in places like, you guessed it, Bali, but also that it's actually just really helpful for all sorts of shit. Went way into detail about how you have to catch it midstream of the first pee of the morning, blah blah blah. By the end she was defending it so thoroughly she said she was going to start tomorrow morning. She never did. Now denies the conversation lasted more than 5 minutes and that everyone was egging her on. My family is known as a particularly dramatic family and my brother and I caused a bit of chaos on the regular, but my aunt passing out at the dinner table from methadone really made us look like angels. Ugh. My brother did the same thing one year, nodded off with a fork full of mashed potatoes in his hand. His 11-year-old daughter from his first marriage was sitting next to him. She burst into tears and ran out of the room. Good times. My grandma accidentally poured dish soap on the turkey instead of oil. Might have been one of the funniest but most upsetting things I've ever seen. Edit. Thanks everyone. I guess this story is internet famous now. College Humor webpage. My family member was transporting our meal between houses in their car and slid off the road, sending the turkey, mashed potatoes, stuffing, desserts, everything flying around the car into a massive swirl of messy destruction. It was just upsetting lol. I think we ended up ordering KFC that year. I think I remember my grandfather once telling a story about a turkey going through his windshield when he had to slam on the brakes on the freeway. I thought it would be a funny prank to put a rubber chicken in the oven on Thanksgiving. My mom would laugh and laugh. Ho ho ho. There's a rubber chicken in the oven. What a gag. 13-year-old me didn't realize that normal adults usually preheat the oven before putting the turkey in. My mom hid my Easter basket in the oven one year. Forgot she'd done it. Preheated. Fun times. My mom would typically put our Easter baskets in the oven when we weren't getting something out of them, just to keep them away from the dogs. She preheated them 2 years in a row, and X200B. Then we started getting Häagen-Dazs for Easter instead. She didn't fire up the oven a single time between Easter and Thanksgiving. Nice. Well, if it's any consolation, when I was about 15 I was at a friend's house and we decided to make cinnamon rolls which required us to preheat the oven. Only later did we realize my friend's mother liked to store her plastic Tupperware in the oven, which we only discovered after it was all completely melted. To this day I still always check the oven before I preheat. If you're going to store stuff in an oven, at least put non-flammable things in there. A couple of years ago, I started smelling this funky smell in my kitchen. It was like old, rotting food, but we didn't keep food in the area that it was strongest, so I assumed a mouse died in the wall or something. I preheated the oven a few days later and the smell got so bad all of a sudden. So I thought, okay, is a dead mouse behind the oven? I opened the oven and there was a pan my husband had cooked steaks on like 10 days before. A wave of hot death smell just hit me straight in the face. It was summer, so we weren't using our oven much because it heats the kitchen. So that's why it took so long to discover it. Also, who puts a dirty pan back in the oven? My cousin tried showing us the boot trick. It was a way to get the cork out of a bottle of wine without a corkscrew. You put the bottom of the bottle in your shoe and hit it against the wall and it's supposed to get the cork out. He gathers us all outside to show us how it works. We're all standing in my aunt's driveway to see the trick. Upon hitting the wall, the entire bottle shatters and his shoe is soaked in red wine. I guess that's pretty mild. My family gets along pretty well. Every Thanksgiving and Christmas dinner my step-grandfather will always bring up his father's death. Always goes into detail about how he walked into the kitchen to see his father's body on the floor with his head blown off. Either that or politics. He definitely needs to go to therapy. This sounds like one of the only outlets he currently knows of to try to cope with his PTSD. He's doing it in a really uncomfortable way, but he's reaching out to y'all. Could be a good idea to rally the family to try to get him to a good therapist. That sounds horrible. Sounds like dude hasn't gotten over it. Dead bloody people stays with people. It's clearly still bothering him, and something about the holiday triggers the memory. I don't see how anyone could ever shake something like that. My grandparents had a new oven, and my grandmother had never made a turkey in it before. The turkey drippings somehow caught fire and the kitchen filled up with smoke. We called 911, but by the time the fire department arrived, my dad and grandfather had put out the fire, and X200B. So, when the firemen arrived, there was no more fire. They were really nice and understanding. My grandmother was mortified. My drunk aunt tried hitting on all of the firemen even though she had a good 25-30 years on them. My cousin and I just stood in the front yard drinking beers in silence, watching it all play out. And X200B. Fortunately, the turkey was fine and dinner proceeded normally once everything settled down. My aunt not being able to come because she was in jail for trying to shoplift the turkey from the grocery. Did she use a maternity dress? Nobody's gonna fuck with someone super pregnant. Side note, keep a bottle of water down there and just scream I need to go to the hospital. My husband's out in the car. You're welcome, Alabama. She either had a gigantic bag or under her shirt. It was like 18 years ago, so I don't truly remember. Actually, I know exactly how people steal shit like turkeys. Strap something like a cloth shopping bag to your legs. Do whatever you need to do to make sure it won't fall down, and wear a long dark dress. Do whatever it takes to get out of sight. Hitch up the dress. Put the damn turkey in the bar and walk awkwardly out of the store. I can't say that you'll meet with success, or that you should even try, but the amount of shit you can fit under dresses is absurd. And like all good thefts, it's a multiple person job. It works best with a lookout and some distractions, people to help sell it, and a getaway vehicle. Do whatever you need to do to make sure it won't fall down, so a rigorous Kegel regimen starting the week before. Got it? I find this heartbreaking, actually. Being desperate enough to steal food, let alone a turkey for Thanksgiving, is a terrible place to be. I'd contemplated it on a few occasions over the years, when my kids had been eating only rice, eggs and potatoes way longer than I was comfortable with. But we always got help from somewhere. A neighbor actually slaughtered one of his goats for us one time. We had never eaten goat meat before, but weren't about to say no dart. Just last week my kids' elementary school held their annual turkey trot race for the students. The winning kid got to take home a turkey. My 9-year-old came in second place last year, so I told him this year if he won and any other child was crying because their family needed that turkey, even if that kid came in last place, I completely expected him to give that turkey away. Luckily my kids understand hard times. His response was, if that happens I'll tell them that my mama can cook it for them too. If their power is off, that's my boy. My mother and grandmother had plans to go to a restaurant last year. My sister convinces them to go somewhere else at last minute. Of course this means no reservations, but sister is convinced that it'll be fine and they might just have to wait a few minutes for a table. I live in another state, so I get to experience all of this from a distance. They end up sitting at the bar while waiting for a table, having a few drinks and appetizers. After the second round of martinis my mother looks over and my grandmother is leaning back in her chair, completely limp and unresponsive. Everyone freaks out. Paramedics are called. Grandma is rushed to the ER. I'm 1,200 miles away when my mother calls to tell me what happened. At this point grandma is at the ER, still unresponsive, crazy low blood pressure and high heart rate. I'm ready to book plane tickets and rush to the airport when mom calls back, don't worry, everything's okay. Your grandmother just got drunk. Her blood test came back completely normal except with a back of 0.24. 3x legal limit. She was awake now, so I got to talk to her and she was crying, I'm so sorry, I've ruined Thanksgiving. I assured her that she hasn't ruined Thanksgiving, and that everyone is just happy she's okay. So my grandma is 90 years old, about 4 feet 8 inches, 100 pounds. She hadn't eaten anything all day because she knew they were having a big dinner. She also ordered another martini while no one was looking. So the second martini was actually her third. This turned into the perfect storm of really drunk grandma. TL. Dr. Grandma got run over by a martini. My grandma is going on 107 and the doctor told her she can't have her daily glass of wine anymore because she gets too drunk off of that. She got the green light for beer though. At 107 I would not give a shit about what doctors say, not because they are wrong. Is that I would consider anything past 80 an extra. My grandfather is 95 and my aunt is a nutritionist. She tries to ration desserts at holidays. FFS, the man is in bonus time. Let him have whatever he wants. Also, if the smoking for 50 years didn't kill him, I don't think marzipan will. My grandfather, 90, recently passed from cancer. When we found out, the DRs said we can't do shit for the cancer. It was bad and pretty much everywhere. But we can make you comfortable. Cue my aunt refusing to give him his prescribed painkillers because it's a govt conspiracy to get him addicted to opioids. And exclamation point. At this point. So fucking what? Yep, one of my aunts decided her morphine and diet should be policed. Luckily my mom was there to step in and tell her to fuck off. The woman had weeks, months left alive. Let her have whatever she wants to eat and as much morphine as she needs to stay somewhat comfortable. At one point near the end, she was lucid enough to wax poetic about how much she loved raspberries with whipped cream. Aunt tried to say she couldn't have it. Granddad drove around for 2 hours to find fresh berries. Out of season, so not easy. Mom hand whipped cream for her. It ended up being her last meal. Wow, that's amazing. I want to get to 107. It won't happen because I drink much more than one glass of wine. Lol. At my friend's conservative Catholic family's house for Thanksgiving, and his older brother told everyone that my pal had gotten a tattoo. His parents were pissed, and forced him to show them the tattoo. When they saw that it was a dollar sign on his left butt cheek, there were tears. My dad broke my grandparents' toilet with the power of his bowels. He ended up having to buy them a new toilet, which he broke a year later at Christmas with the same method. If you can tell, my family fears my dad's bowels, and we have many more stories about him and toilets. I heard some screaming from outside my apartment. I opened the door and saw this lady running to the dumpster with a turkey still in the pan on fire. She threw it into the dumpster, which then caught fire. I called 911 so the fire department could put it out. Hello? Yes, 911, my dumbass neighbor threw a flaming turkey in a dumpster which is now caught on fire. Can you send the fire department to put it out so I can enjoy my Thanksgiving dinner? I'd imagine being a 911 operator would be one of the most emotionally taxing jobs. One minute you get a call about the darkest, most depressing thing. The next, Lord Jesus, the bird is on fire. I totally agree. So many highs and lows. I couldn't do it. I don't know how I'd manage without a break after every call. Between them and first responders EMS, it's crazy how much pressure they're put under, and for so little reward. They are all really underappreciated. They have to take every call seriously, including pranks or malicious calls. They don't exactly get the perks that cops out in the field get either, but they still get some of the downsides. Only worst job I can think of is the guy who has to go through and analyze all the child porn. A lot of time it's women. I worked at the USAO during law school and was the only female clerk and was the only one who was assigned CP cases, both for research and trial prep. This Thanksgiving would be special. We invited somewhere around 25 people. Normally it would have been 12, and everyone arrived. Naturally, my mother bought a seriously large turkey, and had it slow cooking all day. It was going to be the highlight of the day and everyone was looking forward to it. Fast forward, the turkey is out of the oven and is being carved. It looks and smells delicious. The table is set. Everyone sitting down at the table, passing around mashed potatoes and talking about whatever. My mom is bringing the turkey from the kitchen into the dining room. She drops the turkey platter. It shatters. Turkey and porcelain shards litter the floor. Thankfully, most of the turkey was salvaged due to the 5-second rule. Some of us had shards of turkey platter on our plates, but it wasn't a big deal. The turkey was as good as it promised to be, and it is sometimes mentioned as the legendary floor bird. The fact that you all call it the legendary floor bird makes this story pretty great. That was the day that 25 people agreed in 5 seconds that the 5-second rule applies to a whole turkey. Aunt opened the pressure cooker without releasing the pressure first. Went about as well as you can imagine. Edit. I'm not sure what she was cooking, but I like the pressure release was a little rubber nipple Y thing on the top. And there were, like, clips on the outside that kept the lid on. I was around 11 when it happened, so I wasn't spending much time in the kitchen. Edit 2. Electric Boogaloo. She just got burned. No serious long-lasting injuries. I guess he might have still only been her fiancé. Drove her to the hospital. She was home the same day and not allowed back in the kitchen for a while. My grandmother did that. I spent a lot of time on a ladder scraping green beans off of the ceiling. My uncle broke one of my grandmother's antique chairs during an aggressive game of spoons. It was too funny for anyone to be mad. If you don't get aggressive playing spoons, then you're not playing it correctly. Mom bought a new stove and had me, my brother, his very pregnant girlfriend, and a few others over for Thanksgiving. About a half hour to an hour before the turkey was supposed to be done. Mom checked on it. It was still raw. She had hit the wrong button when programming the new stove and accidentally shut it off. Luckily we learned you can in fact microwave a turkey because, judging from the look my brother's pregnant GF gave, she was ready to eat my mom. Not surprising the turkey was a bit dry but otherwise not bad. Spent all day cleaning the house for the guests. Made sure the windows were incredibly clean and clear. Little brother and cousin were chasing each other outside. Brother comes running through the door which was clearly open because you couldn't see the glass. He slammed through the plate glass window and got a massive gash on his face and leg, 80 stitches, plastic surgery, and a multiple day hospital stay. Don't clean your windows too well. Can I show this to my wife next time she wants me to clean the patio door? Honey, fingerprints save lives. But it's so dirt. They save lives. I did this one Christmas as my grandparents' house. Not once, not twice, but 3 times on one afternoon. I fortunately bounced off the glass and don't go through it, but my mum was worried I may have injured my brain. Come to think of it, that would explain a lot. And I thought my glass door story is nasty. Had to pick up my parents, which were invited to a friend's place to celebrate his birthday. When I arrived, friend's wife led me in and told me that everyone is upstairs. I never visited this place before, so, I mean, who the hell puts a glass door without a handle or a frame or anything that would say something is here at the last step of a quite steep staircase? I ran into that door, broke my nose, fell down the stairs backwards and somehow managed to break 2 toes and a knuckle on the way down. But in comparison to your 80 stitches story, that was actually quite restful, I guess. My cousin stole a 4-wheeler from a police dispatcher and left it in our yard. Told us he and a buddy would come back later to get it cause it was out of gas. Mom sent me to Kroger that morning hoping they had pie shells and called me when I was driving back warning me not to speed cause police were all over our road. We lived on Farmer Mile Long Country Road. We were the only house on it. The police took our statements, retrieved the ATV, and we didn't have chocolate pie because of freaking course Kroger is gonna be out of frozen pie shells at 8 AM on Thanksgiving morning. What were you thinking, mama? That's poor planning on everyone's part. And X200B, your cousin for not getting the stolen property away, your mom for not thinking ahead about the pie shells, and you for not thinking of a way of getting out of being the one stuck going to Kroger at 8 AM when they totally weren't gonna have pie shells. OMG. I come from a big southern family that eats Thanksgiving dinner at noon and Kroger was a 30-minute drive each way. The baking had been going on since the night before. I was stoked to get out of the house for an hour. My 4-year-old sister was sitting at the dinner table next to Grandma. After taking a bite of something she said my tongue hurts, to which Grandma replied, "Well, come here and let me kiss it to make it feel better." The moment their lips touched, my sister vomited directly into Grandma's mouth. My dad bursts into laughter and Grandma passes off my sister while she gets up to go clean up in the bathroom. Not more than 5 seconds after she left, a 2-square-foot chunk of the ceiling caved in and fell directly onto her chair. TLDR, my sister puked into my grandmother's mouth to save her life while eating Thanksgiving dinner. I am envisioning the Grim Reaper in training was like fuck, wrong grandma, do something, make the child vomit. When I was a little kid, I asked to say the prayer, It was a big honor to get to say it. My family was notorious for fighting, so I said my little prayer all nice and cute, then ended with a smartest God please let my family act normal today and not fight. Before I could blink, my German grandmother slapped me across the face really hard, which pissed my mother off. Lots of yelling and we left. My grandma smacked me with a buttock knife on the flat side over my hand. I apparently went to fill my plate too soon after the prayer and her first instinct was to smack me. Grandma made me cry cause I respected her a fuck ton and I didn't understand what I did wrong. I didn't think she was the type to do that. Jesus Christ, I'm surprised your mom didn't respond by slapping her back. What a horrible thing to do to a kid, especially for something so minor. The worst one was probably where the entire family, or not 20 or so, got sick, so we all had to take turns going into the bathroom to throw up for the rest of the night. Nobody ate the turkey after that. I am allergic to turkey and spent every Thanksgiving violently ill till I was about 14 and put it together. I am not a huge fan of the holiday now. It took 14 years of being sick specifically on Thanksgiving for your family to realize ? My great-grandmother died at the table right as we were bowing our heads to pray on Thanksgiving. She had been slowly dwindling in health, so the whole family gathered together figuring it was her last Thanksgiving. Little did we know how right we were. Her kids, their kids and their kids' kids. Family she hasn't seen in years. About 20 people all gathered around with her pushed up in her recliner. Food is stuffed on the table and we bow our heads to pray. She was devoutly religious. Before we dig in, as we raise our heads and open our eyes, we find great-grandma slumped over, tongue lolling out dead, as someone started compressions and another person called an ambulance. My youngest cousin dug into her meal completely unaffected by the dead body. Anyway, a nice memory for Thanksgiving every year. Your youngest cousin realized if they didn't get stuck and they'd have cold food later, prioritized what they could focus on and have impact with. Smart. If they didn't eat now, they wouldn't eat until after grandma's death was dealt with. Shovel some food in so you aren't starving through the whole ordeal. I did the same thing when my wife went into labor. My wife still gives me shit for it, but I don't regret it in the least. Honestly, as terrible as it is, it's kind of wonderful. Your great-grandma went peacefully, it seems, in her recliner surrounded by family who cared enough to spend one last holiday. We can all only dream about being that loved in the end. You have to think for your grandmother it was the perfect time to go. I had a 99-year neighbor pass while her whole family was there. Kids and grandkids, her dog sitting in her lap. They had just gone for ice cream, her favorite, and were having a nice chat. Her head fell back in her recliner and that was that. Always seemed a wonderful way to go. Someone will say pass the dinner rolls in front of my dad and he will pick it up and throw it at them. Every single year. You have to specifically say please hand me the dinner rolls or you get a bun thrown at your head. You need to start ruthlessly critiquing his form when he does it. What the fuck, Dad? Are you John Lester trying to pick a guy off first base? Are you trying to throw glitter on a fairy? Maybe a little less flop sweet coming off the old cannon there next time Pops 50 Cent throws a better pitch than that. You look like Lucy Ricardo throwing a lamp at Ricky for coming home late. And just continue on until you run out of material. We have a couple of restaurants here in Missouri called Lambert's that pride themselves on throwing rolls. If he ever needs a job. So 25 years ago my son was born early November. My mom's family is all prim and proper. So my adopted brother takes my 2-week-old son to check his diaper during dinner. Comes back with diaper in hand saying it doesn't look right. Proceed to smell it, said something is wrong. So he tasted it. Everyone is flipping out. He filled a clean diaper with pumpkin pie filling. It was hilarious. Just had my first child a couple weeks ago. We're going to a family Thanksgiving that is prim and proper. This might have to happen. This will be the de facto moment where you decide if you're going to be the fun dad. Choose wisely. Defecato, it's Italian for shit yourself. Edit. Holy shit, that's actually what it means. My husband did something like this to my brother and oldest son once. My brother and son were hanging out together at my house, playing video games on their laptops in the living room. They're the kind of people who get so involved they have no idea anyone else is existing around them. They didn't hear my husband ask me to bring him 2 diapers. One actually for the diaper change and the other for prank. And a pudding cup. He dumped the pudding into a clean diaper, got the boys' attention, and started this long explanation about how surely they've heard that urine is sterile when it leaves the body, but did they know poop is too? They're laughing, groaning, rolling their eyes at this guy clearly teasing them about eating poop. He picks up a diaper and shows them it's full of brown mush, and he leans over and takes a lick. They both freaked. It was amazing. I love this, but I know I could never attempt it with a straight face. Good for him. I was probably 6 or 7 at the time. My mom's candles caught the kitchen curtains and some decorative greenery on fire. My sister and my cousins and I were at the kids' table in the kitchen while the adults were in the dining room. So no one of significance noticed anything except me. My mom threatened us with pain of death if we annoyed the adults during dinner. So I quietly walked to the dining room and stood silently for a minute or two, until someone noticed me, and only then did I politely say, "Sorry, but the kitchen's on fire." My mom still gives me grief about my prioritizing politeness over sense. I once let my parents know, "Hey, the tissue box is on fire." Cue my usually stoic parents panicking and shoving it in the sink. Once that was over, they made fun of me for being so nonchalant about it. That story still gets told. Something similar happened, but the roles were reversed. My family was having pizza, and put the pizza box in the oven to keep it warm. My dad walks in and goes, "Is something burning?" Without looking up, my mom says, "Yeah, the pizza box." So my dad opens the oven and the pizza box is just on fire in the middle of the oven. I've never let my mom live it down. My grandparents' neighbor burnt her house down that way. Put pizza in oven to keep it warm. Pizza box caught on fire. She tosses burning box into garage. Fumes ignite. Large explosion. Half of house is gone. End. Dear sister, madam. Fire! Exclamation mark. Fire! Exclamation mark. Help me! Exclamation mark. I set the kitchen on fire once during a family event. I think it might have been New Year's though. I was melting wax in a jam jar on the stove to make, well, it was some sort of explosive we were going to set off in the backyard, and it was before 9/11, so people didn't care much. The jar cracked, the wax spilled over the burner and caught fire. I grabbed a glass of water to pour on it and remembered at the last second never to pour water on a grease fire. Still slopped a bit on while I was pulling the glass away and the fire doubled in size. Grabbed a fire extinguisher and managed to put it out without damaging anything. I was only a toddler at the time, but Thanksgiving is known as the anniversary of the day my mother, father, and uncle outed one another as heroin addicts. Life fell apart fairly rapidly the following year, and it has been fun ever since. Thanksgiving is now just a small family affair of myself, my brother, and my guardian grandparents. Edit. Thanks for the concern. My brother and I are doing well. I'm 23 now, and this was about 20 years ago so far as I know. It was exactly like a Mexican standoff for mayo. For my parents and uncle, they have been in and out of jail, rehab, crack houses, and everything in between. My mom certainly struggles more than my dad does. BC, she's bipolar and has always been more than a little selfish and narcissistic. Drugs just made it a hell of a lot worse, but my grandparents are my parents now, and they're wonderful, strong, and inspiring people, so I'm not particularly bothered. Happy Thanksgiving. Always moving onward. My dad once put celery in the gravy knowing full well that I hate celery. He pretty much ruined Thanksgiving. The idiot. So yeah, I know how you feel. A friend invited me to Thanksgiving dinner with his family one year, and it was an incredibly bizarre experience. Fun, but bizarre. My friend's sister is a heroin addict, which everyone knew. Their family is pretty open about drugs because my friend's parents were rabid pot smokers and experimented a lot when they were younger. So, while my friend's sister had a real problem, she didn't try very hard to hide it. The bizarre part was sitting next to my friend's 90-year-old nearly deaf grandma as she made small talk with me while my friend's sister on the opposite side of the table was so high she was practically falling asleep into her plate. My friend's grandma and his parents just totally ignored it. Meanwhile, my friend is incredibly irritated that his sister chose to shoot up right before dinner and is making sarcastic comments about how classy his sister is, which everyone is also ignoring. I had nowhere else to go that Thanksgiving, so I considered it a good time regardless. I was grateful they took me in that night. I was having a farting contest with my cousin in the bathroom. She let out one of those ones that ends in an upturned squeak, like her arsehole was meekly asking me a question. I lost it and threw my head back in laughter, and when my head came back down, it was into the granite countertop at like 127 miles per hour. I split my forehead open and had to go to the ER for stitches, but wait, there's more. In the ER, one of the nurses asked how I cut my forehead and I told her I was laughing at a fart. She farted in response. I was 11, so obviously it was the funniest goddamn thing that had ever happened to me. Anyway, I'm 30 now and still have that stupid scar right between my eyebrows, and sometimes I remember how I ruined Thanksgiving like 20 years ago and then a nurse farted and I laugh. Like her arsehole was meekly asking me a question. I am going to be laughing about this all day. My oldest sister called another sister a fat bitch over some stupid fight they've been having for years, who then in turn picked up the bowl of green bean casserole and threw it at her. She missed. It wasn't that far, but I guess she was really angry and that messed up her aim. And it ended up hitting my mother's favorite painting. It wasn't salvageable. We all stopped having Thanksgiving with the entire family after that. One Thanksgiving, my aunt, a very hefty woman, decided to wear an all-green outfit for some insane reason. At the time, a canned vegetable company called Green Giant had an ad campaign going. Yowta web page. My cousin and I were walking through the carport and she rounded the corner coming towards us. The entire family heard him say ho 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 and me chime in perfectly with Green Giant. There was about a second and a half where the world was totally silent. I swear even the birds stopped singing. Then laughter started with my uncle and the entire group just fell apart laughing, except for my aunt. She started swinging and we took off running. Thank you for the solid laugh. Screw you for getting that jingle stuck in my head for the next 4 hours. Hello person who made this comment 4 hours ago. Time for me to remind you of the green giant jingle. I'll see you again in 4 hours time. My dad spilled his red wine into the freshly carved turkey meat one Thanksgiving. Now every time he finishes carving it we ask him if he wants to marinate it first, or have it plain. My mom used to give gifts with the words we can return and exchange everything and serve fish with the words careful, there might be fish bones. Now we say careful, there might be fish bones when receiving gifts and ask to exchange the fish before eating. Last Thanksgiving was absolutely the worst. My extended family live in another state, so it was just me and my parents. My mom was pissed at my stepdad for various reasons, so she stayed in her room all day. My stepdad and I awkwardly ate in silence while watching The Godfather. Then after dinner he had a heart attack. He died in the hospital a few days later. My mom was crushed that he was gone, and crushed at how she treated him in their last few days together. That was last year. I'm not excited to see what this year brings. I hope your mom doesn't hang on to those feelings. My dad died a couple years ago in January. My brother had a huge fight with him on Christmas with everyone in the extended family over that culminated in my brother telling my dad he wished my dad wasn't in a wheelchair so he could knock him out like he deserved. It was so fucking awkward. Our family knows my dad was a bully and an asshole, but it was like the air was sucked out of the room. My brother left and that was that. When my mom called to tell me she didn't know what to do, but my dad didn't seem to be breathing, I told her to call 911 and I'd get everyone to head to the hospital. When I got in touch with my brother, he says don't care and I said okay and moved on. There was 6 of us, so a lot more people to contact and I was driving an hour and a half home at 90 miles per hour. When I was about 20 miles away, my oldest brother called and told me he had died. I picked up my youngest brother in a different city and headed home. My middle brother, the one that had fought with my dad, was so fucking distraught when I got there. He wouldn't talk to anyone and kept walking away from everyone that engaged him. But we've always been really close. I got him alone in my car and he finally started crying in this primal, broken way. It was horrible. This was a couple years ago, and my brother is still so angry at himself for having that as his last interaction with our dad. It's caused him to distance himself further from the family, and he won't stop lashing out. Our youngest brother died last year, and it caused another great divide and more fighting. He's fought with my entire family about everything. We were the last ones in touch until recently. I know now that he's addicted to painkillers and has completely walled himself off. I keep reaching out but he doesn't respond. I won't stop reaching out, but I really wish I had found a way to help him let this go before it turned so far south and he became an addict. Edit. Wow. I'm so blown away by all of your responses and messages. Thank you all so much. The truth is, I don't have support in this and haven't for a long time. My brother and sisters have written him off. There were 6 of us, 3 boys, 3 girls. Losing my brother last year brought us down to 5. My mom has been kind of distant since their fight, so she just repeats the mean things my sisters say. In a really fucked up twist, our uncle died suddenly this morning, and no one had called him, but he answered my call. We've been talking and texting all day. I'll be back in town to see everyone tomorrow, and he went to comfort my mom and our aunts and uncles and did fine today. We're seeing each other tomorrow, and although I'm in a horrible mourning period, my uncle was also my Nino, or godfather, so we were extremely close. I'm happy to spend time with everyone, and try to mend fences. To answer a couple questions, I'm his sister. I'm 35. The youngest in the family. My brother that passed was 4 years older than me, so I'll try to make a coherent list in order. 1. C. Oldest sister. 2. V. Oldest brother. 3. J. Middle brother. 4. P. Youngest brother. Passed in 2017. 5. M. Middle sister. 6. Me. Youngest sister. My husband tries to be supportive, but he had a real sheltered, loving childhood, and he could never think of abandoning his brothers. He's the oldest of 3 boys. So after almost 10 years together, he thinks my family is insanely fucked up. He's not wrong, and doesn't really have a frame of reference for shitty, crazy fights, nastiness, and my need to piss on a 10-acre fire. He thinks my dad was an abusive piece of shit. True. And he ruined my brothers and sisters and created this issue. His dad is no son, and we found that out about 5 years ago. But that's nothing compared to the deep roots of decay in my family. My mom and her family are insanely close. They don't fight and forgive each other for everything. We were never close to my dad's side of the family, so we tried to emulate my mom's side, and be extra loving and care for each other. For some reason, that was our family until about 10 years ago. All of a sudden, it was a constant fight. I've always been the one to smooth things over and try to keep things light and positive, but it's a constant 10 spinning plates situation. I don't live in their town. The only one who doesn't now, and the distance helps keep me out of it, as long as they don't bring it to me. The second I'm home, someone is pulling me aside to tell me about a fight and asking me to fix it. It's a hard job, but I'll never stop trying to build us back up. The problem isn't just my brother, he's a product of the fucked up environment we grew up in, and while I can't totally absolve him of his choices, I can say that this has made me tired to the bones. I had cancer last year, but we found it after my brother's death, and it was like it wasn't happening to my brothers and sisters. They just kept fighting and trying to drag me into it. You all renewed my faith in trying, so I appreciate it. You truly don't know how much I appreciate your thoughts and support and love. I'll take anything at this point, but you've all made me feel very much like I do need support in order to keep going. You've all made me feel like a better sister than I've felt like in a long time, and I appreciate it immensely. Thank you. How sad for everyone involved. You sound like a really good, supportive person. He's lucky to have you in his corner. Oh man, that sucks. I hope he pulls through this and knows he has siblings who love him. I'm so sorry that's happening to you, but I know how it feels. In my own way. In 2004 my grandfather died, then my mom committed suicide, and then my grandmother died, all within about 8 months of each other. Of course this was hard on my siblings and I, but I was 17 at the time and I'm the oldest of 4. The people I think it was hardest on at the time were my aunts and uncles. My mom had 5 siblings and they lost their parents and sister in that short time span. A lot went down between them after that, but now basically none of them even talk anymore. They fought about the money that was left by my grandfather the most. My aunt and I talked about it once and she described it by saying that death in a family is like a band-aid being ripped off. Any issues that existed before the death that aren't completely healed over will open up more and more and fester more and more. For some families, tragedy brings them together. For others, it completely rips them apart. I hope things get better for you and yours. You sound like a really great person and your family is lucky to have you. I'm leaving for basic training the day before Thanksgiving this year. So, my family celebrated on Sunday. My mom and stepdad were supposed to stop by. They live an hour south, and have a cabin an hour north. On their way home, well, 6 PM rolls around and they still haven't shown. Turns out, My SD decided that he didn't want to go to my uncle's and instead wanted to meet us at my grandparents', which he never told us. So he just drove right on home, denying my mother her last chance to see me before I'm gone until February. I'm honestly still pretty angry. When you finish boot camp, don't add him on the list of people who can come watch the graduation ceremony. They will not let him on base and he can sit in the car and wait. Good luck, man. It's gonna suck, but you'll meet some great people. Thanksgiving at my aunt and uncle's. My grandparents are there as well. It was in Calgary. We lived in Regina and my grandparents in Kelowna. Pretty close to a full day's drive, especially for a vacationing family. My cousin was kind of spoiled and a very bratty attention whore. We are at the dinner table and she is sitting in her chair kind of dancing and flailing her arms everywhere while singing. My father says to my grandfather, "I'll bet you all the change in my pocket that glass of milk goes flying." My aunt gets pseudo outraged by this and tells my cousin to keep going. Sure enough, milk goes flying. My grandfather reaches into pocket and hands all of his change to my dad. My cousin immediately starts crying and runs upstairs. My aunt and grandmother chase after her. We sit there in awkward silence for a minute or two and my grandmother comes downstairs and she is burning red like the fires of hell. Looks at my uncle, her son, and exclaims, "Keith, your wife just spit in my face. Alfred, we're leaving." They packed their bags, and up and left home to drive 8 hours back to Kelowna, and we did the same thing to Regina. No one spoke to that side of the family for nearly a decade. Your aunt told your cousin to keep flailing around? What the fuck? In what world do they live in that flailing around is something one should do at a dinner table? She was just having fun. My aunt had some kind of mental illness and looking back a definite insecurity about her daughter as well. She got away with basically anything because they were very well off and never really figured out how to say no until much too late in her life. My family had a Thai exchange student during Thanksgiving one year. Thanksgiving is huge in our family. 35 plus people at dinner. Tons of food. Appetizers out the wazoo. etc. And this was going to be her first and only Thanksgiving. So we really played up how exciting it was. We told her that there was going to be a ton of food, so don't eat a big breakfast. Save room for the amazing Thanksgiving food. She ended up not eating anything at all on Wednesday or Thursday morning and fainted in my uncle's living room on Thanksgiving Day. She hadn't even eaten many appetizers. Turned out that she didn't know what that word meant, and didn't know she was allowed to eat the food that was spread out all over the coffee table and bar. We almost had to take her to the emergency room because her English wasn't quite good enough to explain why she fainted, and we thought something was seriously wrong. After all that, she ended up not even liking the food. IDK what it was about this story, but I really want to try Thai peanut sauce on turkey now. Oh fuck, that sounds so good. Maybe next year I'll try to make Thai peanut sauce stuffing, and fill the turkey with it. I had been living in Thailand and always told the Thai family I stayed with how much we love to eat turkey in America. So the guy goes out and finds a live turkey for sale and fashioned an oven to cook it up. He served it in bite-sized pieces with a homemade dipping sauce that was delicious. Not traditional, but it was an interesting diversion. Our Brazilian exchange student broke his arm on Thanksgiving. Good times. 3 words. Deep frying turkey. It's a good thing we decided to do it in the driveway, instead of in the garage. For the passerby that reads this, turn off the damn fire while you lower the turkey into the hot oil. 1. Heat oil. 2. Turn off the burner. 3. Lower the turkey into the oil. 4. Wipe up any spilled oil and relight the fire. It's really not hard to cook a turkey without lighting your house or driveway on fire. Also, to avoid overflow, we do a test fit with the turkey. Fill the pot with water enough to cover it, and remove the turkey. The water comes down to a certain level that we mark, so we know where to fill the oil to. Once the turkey goes into the oil now, the oil doesn't get displaced over the side of the pot onto the flames 5+ years and no issues. So far. Edit. Make sure it's totally thawed out too. Any ice and water under pressure high temp make for quite the volatile turkey. Glad to provide the knowledge. And as long as you continue to treat it like a low yield explosive, you probably never will have an issue. It's when you get complacent that they get ya. And make sure the turkey is fully thawed. A random chunk of ice dislodging in a deep fryer is an instant grease fire. I get 3 calls a year minimum from folks who don't think that far ahead. Well done. See, we don't really do the deep frying a turkey thing in Scotland. We don't have Thanksgiving. But damn me if I don't look out across the fields in front of the house to the gravel quarry in the end of the farm and think, if I just set up a scaff pole tripod there, burner and pot underneath, and use the chain hoist to drop it in. I'm a technical guy with the fire brigade though, and the thought of having to call my operational colleagues, and all the stations that are likely to respond on my patch, when it inevitably goes shit-shaped puts me off. My mother dropped a frozen turkey in a fryer. It sprayed hot oil about 20 feet. Fortunately, I was standing behind my mother and all of the kids were far enough away they didn't get hit. The turkey was still pretty good even after being rewarmed after getting back from the air. I had an experience with this when I was a kid. The deep frying of the turkey went off without a hitch. My dad, after a few beers, decided he wanted to cool down the grease but putting it into plastic 5-gallon buckets in the snow. Cut to hours later and we have went through like 4 or 5 big bags of kitty litter to try and soak up all the grease. I've never seen snow look so disgusting. Turkey grease snow cone sounds like something you could buy in Portland. It's not like a crazy story, but my uncle was dating this lady who was super fake and acted like she was family from the beginning. She kept asking to host a holiday and my mom, wanting to be nice, said she could have Thanksgiving because that was my mom's holiday to host and she wanted the GF to feel included. We all go there and the house is filthy. I'm talking big clumps of old dust bunnies right out in the open all over the place. Living room, kitchen, hallways, just everywhere. Smells like a garbage can. I have to use the toilet and I go upstairs to where she says it is. Laundry everywhere. But I get to the bathroom and it's caked with mold and a mountain of garbage. Makeup supplies and just crap piled on one of the 2 sinks in there. Toilet was white with black gunk caked into the sides. I held my pee. She also ordered in food and served it to us on styrofoam plates. Not that I need it on nice plates, but lady, you begged for a holiday and then didn't do any hosting at all. We never went to her place again. Considering her hygiene skills, you should probably be thankful she didn't cook. Interesting you call them dust bunnies. In Germany they are called, translated, wool mice. Not really a negative incident, but we left my one aunt in charge of cooking the turkey. Fast forward a couple of hours and we're all playing cards when someone mentions, wait, why don't we smell the turkey yet? She completely forgot to turn on the oven and let it sit there for about 5 hours with no heat. We had pizza that year. Wait, no one ever went in to occasionally check on the turkey after your aunt put it in the oven? Turkeys aren't the sort of thing you just set and forget, are they? Turkeys aren't the sort of thing you just set and forget, are they? They are for a plurality of Thanksgiving dinners. And that's why many Thanksgiving turkeys are dry as fuck or undercooked. One year, my aunt brought a full of frozen turkey to our Thanksgiving dinner because everyone had decided to each bring something different for the meal. Thankfully we had already done a turkey, because what the fuck, she'll never live it down ha 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 ha. One Thanksgiving my older brother took over cooking duties. He had just graduated from culinary school and was an amazing chef. My aunt and cousins came over to find a juicy turkey and amazing sides. She likes her turkey burned apparently and made her family not eat the dinner. They all watched us eat. My mom was so pissed they never got invited back to our house for any event for years. Why did her family oblige? No one is stopping me from eating a Thanksgiving dinner. Probably didn't want to deal with the aftermath with the aunt if they did eat. Yeah, if that aunt is crazy enough to flip out at someone else's house on a holiday, you can only imagine what they're like normally. Fear of retaliation by a narcissistic parent. Not in a funny or harmless way, either. Yeah. How did her kids react after being denied a delicious looking and probably smelling meal? I have 3 sisters, all much older, 9, 13 and 15 years older, so they were always far ahead of me in life. They all had families and children etc. well before me. I cannot have children, which they did not know. We are at Thanksgiving table and things are tense. Because they are nasty bitches and I am just waiting for an insult. They start in on me about having children. And I say my husband and I are in the process of adopting. My oldest sister says, that is not really having children. I punched her. Don't regret it. Holy shit. I'd have punched her, too. Fuck people who think adopted kids are fake kids. The glass pan that mom was using to cook the turkey exploded. Dad had to spend a while cleaning glass shards out of the oven. When he gathered them all, he put them into a plastic trash bag and it melted. He got so angry that he kicked the trash can, which destroyed it. So my uncle didn't want to cook the turkey in the oven, so he just shoved it in the microwave for 2 hours. We called him asking how it came out later, and they were shooting hoops with it outside. I've gone through dozens of these at this point, and I nearly shit myself reading this one. See, uncle, the microwave does make meat rubbery. I can't believe someone tried to microwave a whole ass turkey. Incredible. My brother, 10, decides to demonstrate how to properly body slam himself onto a bed to the cousins. Proceeds to hit his head on the windowsill behind the bed and crack his head open. We could see skull. Cousin passes out and the parents only console the kid, who passes out 15 stitches later. We got to eat dinner. I remember once I was on FaceTime with my then best friend and her little cousin was jumping on the bed behind her. She ends up falling and lets out a very loud cry. My best friend turns around and yells out OMG and calls for her family. Family runs in and picks up crying girl and rush out of the room. After a couple minutes my friend returns to the screen and I ask her what happened. She says, oh, I guess she bust her head open. There was blood, like as if she wasn't worried or anything. We just continued the call like nothing happened. During winter, I was sliding on some ice when I slipped. My head slammed into concrete and my mom rushed out. She sat me down on the couch and I say, there's an eagle on the wall. Took about 3 minutes to convince her I wasn't hallucinating, and we have a rock mantle. Looked like an eagle. My preteen fiancé body slammed his cousin onto a bed at their uncle's house while home alone and unsupervised. They sent the bed frame pole through the flooring. They moved it over a few inches and the uncle somehow never knew. Until a few years later when grandma sat down on that edge of the bed and sent it through the weak flooring a second time. Poor GMA thought it was her fault until recent years at a holiday gathering, and the drunk boys finally admitted their fault. Thankfully everyone was amused. My alcoholic uncle got super wasted and spilled red wine all over the antique curtains. The curtains were as white as paper until that day. I was 8 and hanging out with an older family friend. She was about 13. For some reason my very drunk and high aunt thought that this family friend was turning me against my cousin, her daughter, and bursts into the house screaming at her about this. Then said aunt got into a fist fight with another aunt in the front yard. Yeah, we stopped seeing that side of the family for a while. Oh, what I'd give to calmly sip beer while all this unfolds before me. Wish I had a family. That went from funny relatable to very sad. I hope you find people that will accept you like family. Don't be sad. By family I meant a proper goofy family that has incidents like these. I have loads of friends though, and a girlfriend whom I love very much and who reciprocates. Life is good. We had all of the food out in the kitchen at my aunt's house. We all were in the living room and heard a commotion. Merle, my cousin's boyfriend's huge yellow lab, had helped himself to the turkey. He had pulled it from the table onto the floor. It has been almost 14 years. I still give Merle the side eye when we eat around him. Edit. Merle crossed the rainbow bridge today. He was 14. We will miss him. My mom, being British born, always defrosted the turkey on the counter overnight even though we live in California. Somehow we lived to adulthood. But one Thanksgiving, she came down in the morning and the turkey had totally disappeared. We finally decided that somehow our extremely large cat had pulled it off the counter and dragged it down to the basement, hid it, and ate it. I mean, it is a bird. Yup, gotta keep food away from the edge of the counters. Babysat a massive Weimaraner that ate 3 boxes of cereal and 2 loaves of bread when we weren't looking. You best believe cereal now sits above the fridge. I was younger, maybe 10, and my sisters and I were chasing each other around the house. I ran into the bathroom, slid on the floor, and dislocated my knee. I screamed literal bloody murder when I saw my bone pointing the wrong way out of my kneecap. 911 came. I took an ambulance ride to the hospital, where when a doctor tried to relocate my knee, by straightening out my leg and snapping the bone back into place, my drunk father told the doctor he'd fucking kill him if he hurt me. Would not recommend. Hey neat. I also dislocated my knee one Thanksgiving. I believe I was 9. Luckily someone there was a former medic in the military so he just popped that sucker back in. Holidays were spent at granddad's house. One year we were inside watching some corny ass bet Thanksgiving movie, when we heard a crash and screaming. We all go outside to see my 2 female cousins, who were sisters, fighting on the ground while the neighborhood wannabe drug dealer was standing over them laughing. Turns out they were both hooking up with him and they didn't know it until that day. The biggest tragedy was that the cause of the crash was the grill toppling over. We were smoking a ham on it. I was pissed. A family friend, who happened to be lesbian, thought it would be a good idea to carry at least 20 plates across the living room. As one could expect, she dropped all of the plates onto the floor. Then my grandfather, who barely knows this friend, says the most infamous words in our family's history. You know those lesbians. Slippery fingers. As a lesbian your grandfather is my icon now. Edit. Where TFR all you lesbians coming from? Date me SHSJSJSKD. Family member flips out in front of their mother's side of the family because their sibling served salsa to their cousin in a bowl that is too small. What if he wants more dart? They promptly left in a huff and everything was grand for the rest of the day. I was around 5-6 years old. Us kids were playing hide and seek and I hid way in the back of grandma's closet. While I was hiding back there, I found this beautiful deep red robe. I assumed it belonged to my grandfather who died just after I was born. I tried it on and it was huge on me, but the silk felt really smooth and cool. So I decided to go ask my grandma if I could have it to grow into. Turns out granddad was a grand dragon in the Carolina KKK and it was his ceremonial robe. The family members who didn't know about this already were highly upset. The ones who knew were embarrassed as hell. There was a small riot when I walked into the kitchen wearing it. That was an awkward Thanksgiving. I'm so sorry, but I cannot stop laughing at the image of a little kid walking into a kitchen wearing this giant oversized KKK robe and everyone just stopping and looking at him. It was like time froze for a minute and then people were rushing at me from every direction to bum rush me out of the kitchen. It was probably hilarious if you weren't the one with 3 huge women rushing at you like NFL linebackers. It was like time froze for a minute and then people were rushing at me from every direction to bum rush me out of the kitchen. Upvote for bum rush, a term that isn't used often enough, I can just imagine the Curb Your Enthusiasm YouTube webpage. Music playing as everyone freezes what they're doing and stares at the kid. I'm just surprised that their robes are made of silk. I would have thought they'd go with a more all-American fabric, like, I dunno, denim? TLDR, my dad threw mashed potatoes across the kitchen and living room, hitting my mom in the face and sticking in her hair and was eventually arrested. Growing up, my dad was a raging alcoholic and my mom was crazy. So dad is drunk after watching football all day and as he ashed his cigarette on his dinner plate, the phone rings. It's his sister. My mom answers and starts going off about how he's a drunk pose. Dad unleashes his inner Uncle Rico, IMGA webpage, and throws a pile of taters 40-ish feet while seated, and hits my mom in the face, sticking in her hair, shockingly leading to a bigger argument. Later leads to my mom calling the cops and my dad getting arrested for domestic abuse for the tater toss. But this was the early 90s in a small town, so they just drove him around and dropped him back off about an hour later. They are divorced now and my dad is 21 years sober. Tell him way to go on his sobriety. Thanksgiving will be 1 month for me. I grew up in the Boston area with my extended family. My uncle, for reasons I did not know, moved to Ireland when I was very young. One Thanksgiving, my grandparents, the uncle's parents, announced, "We don't want to make anyone upset, but we are going to go to Ireland to visit Uncle." I, 15/M at the time, lolled because why would that make anyone upset? But then I read the room and realized that everyone was pissed. That was the day I found out that my uncle was a deadbeat who molested his own children and then ran away to Ireland. Oh man. Buckle up. Mobile. Excuse formatting. I believe the year was 2014. I had just graduated high school and my family was crumbling. My parents were not doing well in their marriage and my mom had me drive separately so that we would have a second car to leave early with if we needed it. Red flag number 1. Mom did not want to go, but she felt that she should be there since all of her kids were going. Thanksgiving was not a small gathering. I'm talking 90-130 people that rented out space in a church banquet hall to have this gathering. It was a typical West Virginia gathering. Everyone was drinking and talking about church. I don't mind this. I'm just not religious myself. And grandma was about to turn 90 the day after Thanksgiving. So everyone was all over her and she loves attention. Mom and Dad started to argue quietly in the corner about how, just no, Grandma was just interjecting herself into everything, and you could just see the tension building between my parents. They were constantly making passive-aggressive comments to each other and to the family members. It was all the drama in the room. My grandma kept asking me if the kids were okay. No, but we were going to admit that. I told her that we were fine, but she then decided that we needed to extend our stay so that we could go to church on Sunday with her because we obviously needed Jesus. My family has always been atheist. She said we were raised poorly and badly behaved because we didn't have church in our lives. All of my siblings or I were between the ages of 14-18. All have good grades and were polite, etc. I told my mom what she said to me and she blew a freaking lid. Red flag number 2. She went to Dad and told him to tell off Grandma, and he refused and said that she was just trying to help and she thinks Jesus is the answer. She said, and I quote, "The only person WHO needs Jesus in this room is you lying, cheating sob." Dead fucking silent. The whole room just stopped talking and moving. And that's fucking terrifying when there's that many freaking people. Dad then blew up on Mom in front of everyone because she was embarrassing him. Grandma had to sit because she was so stunned. Mom decided to announce to everyone that Dad was cheating on her and she was gathering evidence for the divorce. She then decided to point at every single person she hated in the room and described to them why she hated them. Some examples. Uncle Mike is a fucking pedophile, and everyone knows it, but nobody does anything about it. He was known to be a little too friendly with the kids. Karen and Joe are first cousins and they're married. What the fuck, this was true. They even had the same last name. She turned to Grandma and said, "You're the most bitter old bitch of this entire bunch. I can only hope your pathetic ass doesn't make it to 90. Her 90th birthday was literally the next day. Angie is a meth head slut bag shit excuse for a fucking mother. She had been in and out of jail for drugs, but nobody ever mentioned it, and anytime it was brought up, it was quickly silenced. This was my dad's sister. There was more, but once she was done screaming at the family, she opened the door and yelled, "I cannot wait to be rid of this fucking incest shitty ass WV church bullshit." She then pointed at several people, said fuck you to many of them individually, and then left the building. Needless to say, I went and got my mom and then left with her and my siblings very shortly after that, and I haven't seen that side of the family since. Parents are since divorced and my mom is now happily remarried to a wonderful man. TLDR. Mom announces to all the family that Dad is cheating on her. Then she proceeds to roast several other family members before walking out the door. Edit. My first Reddit silver. Thank you so much. Edit 2. Gold. Thank you. More stories to come. Edit 3. Platinum. Thank you. I feel honored. You guys made my whole freaking week. Your mom is fucking awesome. Just the possibility of exiting a failed marriage with that much style makes me want to have a failed marriage of my very own. Oh, I should have mentioned, my mom is British. That might help explain a bit as well. Haha, my mom is awesome. She has always done stuff like this. I have so many stories of her publicly insulting people. Which part of Britain? I'm British and I want to imagine the scene more accurately. I almost forgot one of the best parts. We never visited this side of the family because it was a 5-hour drive for us. Because of this, we did not know a lot of the people there very well or at all. Anytime Dad would ask my mom if she remembers a person, while right in front of said person, she would just blatantly say no, whether or not she remembered them. It was hilarious to see the looks on people's faces when she would say, "I have no idea who you are and I would rather not know." My mom is brutal. My grandmother asks my atheist uncle to say grace. Normally he complies as he knows it's just a thing his mom likes her kids to do. But other conservative uncle has been proselytizing to him all day and telling him he's worried he's going to hell and taking his non-church going kid with him. So instead of saying grace, he starts with, "Dear Heavenly Father, please tell conservative uncle to take Jesus, Christmas, Easter, and a cross and shove it up his ass." Finishes with an amen. Fisticuffs ensue. Played paintball with my family. My uncle has a receding hairline which left a portion of his head exposed just above his face mask. I took a shot that nailed that portion directly in its center. It was such a perfect shot that it made a circular cut in his scalp which proceeded to bleed. He was fine. But now he has this faint ring of white scar tissue in the center of his head that you can see in the sheen of the light glinting off his head. I knew a guy who had something similar happen, but the paintball was part of his bachelor party, so he ended up with a black and blue horn growing from his forehead for his wedding. What a dumb activity to do so close to the wedding. Do it a couple weeks before so you can heal your wrecked face, people. Worst paintball incident I heard was one where they bought a massive case of paintballs and put it in the tower. The groom was going to hold the tower while everyone else tried to get up there. They give him a head start and he goes running. Gets 10 feet up the ladder and slips on old paint. Crashes to the floor. Broken leg. Didn't even get one shot off. Nailed my brother in the throat. Twice double rings that can be faintly seen in the wedding photos. Everyone has their plates filled. Grandma says grace, then young cousins declares, "I smell dirty pussy." I was somewhere around 10 to 12 too. There was a brush fire in the field next to grandmother's house. Small fire some 100 yards away. But everyone panicked not knowing how quickly it would spread and hell broke loose. So there's my dad sprinting towards the side of the house, pickaxe in hand, shouting, "Dig a trench. Dig a trench," then digging a small hole with the lock axe that would have stopped nothing. Then he points and turns to my uncle yelling, "The hose, the hose. Turn it on." Then my uncle grabs a hose and starts running toward the field. But the hose is connected to nothing. Grandfather, looking on calmly, turns to my dad and goes, "That hose ain't hooked up. I need someone to fix it for me." Chaos continuing on the side of the house. Meanwhile, a 2-year-old gets left alone on the porch in the pandemonium, so we're all watching the fire, and finally my cousin goes, "Where's my sister's name?" ? So then a bunch of people freak out and sprint back in panic to the porch to grab the kid. All the while my dad is pickaxing the ground like a madman yelling, "Dig a trench." Ended with everyone except those digging a trench are crying, laughing their ass off as the fire depth pulls to up take care of business in all of about 20 seconds. The fire never came even remotely close to the house. Most of the stories here only gave me a sensible chuckle, but your story had me laughing so hard that I farted when I am sitting at the table waiting for my family to finish dinner. Used to live in Florida. When I was younger, my grandpa had a deep fryer out on their back porch preparing to deep fry our turkey. A lizard climbed inside where you would light it and got stuck. My grandmother was screaming at my grandpa in front of all our family that he could not kill it. We ended up eating just the sides everyone made. My dad, in true dad fashion, filmed the entire event zooming in on the lizard for a majority of the tape. My mom choked my grandmother for some reason in 2002 or 2003. Cops had to be involved. My mother's side of the family joined us at Thanksgiving. Mom, as usual, made homemade rolls. So, I'm eating one, and I notice one of mom's long black hairs in it, so I started pulling it slowly out, and pulling, and pulling. By the time I stopped, almost all conversation had ceased and one of my cousins piped up. Notice how the roll seemed to fall apart after Juniper Jess Gitter was done? The joke after that was that you could find a little bit of mom in everything she made for dinner. Only that day, it was literally true. My dad had an allergic reaction to shrimp cocktail before dinner and his face blew up. He refused to come out of the kitchen or sit at the table with us. He was just eating his food in the kitchen and trying to act like things were normal. Like yelling out, "Hey, good mashed potatoes this year." Huh. Meanwhile, my mom is anger crying at the table, telling us to just eat our fucking food that she worked all day on. All of us kids are just very scared and very confused. My sister starts crying because things are so weird and no one wants to eat because there is so much tension. Eventually, my mom convinces my dad that she needs to take him to the My high school senior aged brother took the bottle of wine and shared it with 7th grade me and got me drunk for the first time. My parents came home to me throwing up on the bathroom floor. I'm Irish. We don't do Thanksgiving. I'm hijacking this post as it reminded me of my boyfriend's Christmas story. They were woken up at 8 AM on Christmas morning by their mother insisting they have shots of tequila because the bottle will expire. She proceeded to continue drinking, threw up at 11 AM and then began crying because she ruined Christmas and was in bed asleep by 12. The dinner wasn't cooked yet and they hadn't exchanged presents. As soon as my grandma sat down the last person, the cat jumps on the table and has a brain aneurysm and dies in front of 19 people. My little cousins are all screaming. It was terrible. One year, I got so drunk the night before that I was severely hungover and sick on Thanksgiving Day. So much so that I had to bow out and not go to my parents' house where the family dinner was happening and just stay home, something which my mother has given me shit about every single Thanksgiving dinner since. I'm sure I'll hear about it again on Thursday. It was 22 years ago, Mom. I can hold my booze much better now, so give me a goddamn break. Don't let it get you down. As a Midwestern transplant to the West Coast, I was used to getting hammered on Wednesday night because I usually had few options unless I flew home and they were all late in the day. Meet my future wife and we both get hammered the night before and show up looking like ghosts and then are left halfway through the meal to spray shit the in-laws' toilet. Suffice to say, everyone knew I was ass blasting and it was the worst silence I ever walked back in on 10/10 ass blasting again. When my husband was about 14, he went to Thanksgiving with his mom's side of the family in West Virginia. They're exactly the bad stereotypes you've heard about people in West Virginia. His cousins had been getting increasingly creepy on him and his older siblings for years, but this trip culminated in 2 female cousins about his age snuck up on him when they thought he was sleeping and tried lap dancing, grinding on him. He slept in the back of his dad's van that night. It was the last time the family saw those relatives. This is the second West Virginia incest Thanksgiving I've read about in this thread. First time my now fiancée met my older sister was Thanksgiving. She brought 2 bottles of wine to dinner, proceeded to drink both of them to herself, threw up on the table during the meal, starting screaming and crying about how judgy and rude me and my little sister are, and passed out on the couch before anyone had even gotten up yet. My mother cried. I was humiliated. And my dad thought it was hilarious. Oh, and she tried to sell my fiancés an axe earlier in the evening. Safe to say, we don't see much of each other outside of holidays. I had been in a relationship with a girl for about 2 years and I was at Thanksgiving dinner with her family. It was a small group, maybe 8 or 9 adults in total. with grandma there. Now it's been years since this relationship ended and I honestly still don't know where it went wrong. We were about 24 and this was her first serious relationship. She kept to herself and disliked people, and opening up to anyone was a very new experience with her. When she did feel the need to communicate something, it was usually weeks or months later, and in a passive-aggressive way. In the middle of dinner I told her, "Hey, stop hogging the Thanksgiving dish," and she replied with, "Well, at least I don't like it in the ass." I started to suspect that she somehow resented the fact that she had been dating a bisexual male. Luckily, grandma couldn't hear much anymore and broke the silence by loudly complimenting the food. Incident: I hadn't seen my parents in 2 years because I lived really far away. They had dinner at my oldest friend's family's house every year, without anyone except my friend knowing. I flew to where he lives and we drove together to his parents' house in time for dinner. We drove up to the house and I saw my unsuspecting parents in the window, drinking wine and having a few appetizers with my friend's unsuspecting parents. I'm smaller than my friend, so I hid behind him when we walked in the door. He went in and was greeted by excited hellos. Then I walked out from behind and everyone froze in surprise. I felt very loved. Edit. It was a good freeze, even with some tears. Thanksgiving 2009 was a shitstorm. My family was visiting my father's side for Thanksgiving and things went fine until around dinner. A cousin comes home with 3 girls wrapped around him. One of the girls is about 7 months pregnant. So my uncle is all pissed and lectures him about making the right choices and some other stuff. Pregnant girl drinks a lot of wine and everyone became drunk. Lots of yelling and fighting occur and my family is just observing this chaos going on. Tears are shed and the pregnant girl leaves with the other girl, leaving one girl with my cousin. They make their way to the bedroom and fucked. Ever since that day we never went back for Thanksgiving. Edit. Well, this blew up. 3 girls, one of whom was pregnant. I was sure this was going to turn into some type of joke where the punchline included the word turducken. My mom, grandmother, and I had just gotten back from eating at my aunt's house. My mom and I lived with my grandmother along with my uncle. I was the first in the house and heard my uncle in a screaming match with his ex-wife on the phone. I had horrible anxiety as a child, so any loud noise or slightly raised voices made me have a panic attack. So I immediately ran to my mom. By this time uncle has unplugged his phone line and his ex is now non-stop calling my grandmother's phone line, making my grandmother anxious to the point of having chest pains. My mom calmly takes the phone and tells her to not call anymore because she thinks her mother is having a heart attack and is going to dial 911. My uncle's ex begins to laugh, which sets my mom off, and calls her a bitch before hanging up. My uncle apparently heard this or had plugged his phone back in and gotten a call from the ex, because he asks my mom to go outside with him to talk. They go on the porch and he says, "I'm glad you came out. I don't want Lorena Sapirot to see what I'm going to do to you," as he lifts his fist up to hit her. Somehow my mom maintained control and simply told him if he hit her he'd be spending the night in jail. My grandmother came outside with some of his clothes in a trash bag and told him to leave. My family is a goddamn Jerry Springer episode. My mom was in the hospital and my dad was supposed to buy propane for the gas stove. Instead he drank up the gas money and then tried to cook the turkey and fixins in the coal furnace. Of course he was drunk cooking and all the food was blackened, still uncooked and covered in coal ash. I still remember the smell of charred turkey and coal. We were not religious, but one of my brothers mumbled grace before we ate. Something like, "Dear God, protect us from this food." He was chased from the table. I'm sure he paid dearly for that comment, but he didn't have to eat. Totally worth it. Last year my parents were discussing my younger brother, who's in college and wanted to take a gap semester. They were concerned because he already wasn't showing much focus and they were worried that if he took a gap semester then he would never go back. I tried to reassure them by reminding them that I, like him, really hated college the first time I went, but then I went back a second time and had more drive and focus because the second attempt was based on my own desire to improve myself, rather than just trying to please them. And my dad very calmly and casually said, "Yay, well, you're not exactly the role model we want him to emulate." And that was pretty much the most savage thing my dad ever said to me. Thankfully I had already known for quite some time that I was the black sheep of the family, but to hear him say it so bluntly was unexpected, and I basically stormed out without another word. That's when you come back with, "Now you're definitely going into a home when you retire. You already put me in a home, then we'll put you in that crooked home we saw on 60 Minutes. I'll be good." Fuck man, that sucks. I'm sorry. My dad did something similar. I got into a STEM school that's got an excellent computer science program, but I transferred out of CS because it wasn't a good fit. Still at the same school, but now I study usability and accessibility design and communication. My brother got into a rival school and, knowing how they structured their classes, I was giving advice based on my experiences and mistakes. My dad interrupted me and said, "Don't listen to one piano player. He couldn't cut it with a real degree anyway, so he doesn't know what the hell is going on anymore." Then he proceeded to shit on my college, my program, my job, and my friends because we were all liberal fucks who will never amount to anything. Then, he attacked my sexuality. I had come out as gay the year before, and he said maybe if we're lucky he won't get AIDS. I left and spent the rest of the break bouncing between people's houses and avoiding my father. Our relationship still hasn't recovered years later. My grandpa and grandma got divorced, and grandpa remarried. One Thanksgiving, my not-so-well grandpa stood and declared he regretted letting my grandma divorce him, and that it was the biggest mistake of his life, right in front of his current wife. Edit. Holy shit, sorry, I didn't realize people would give a fuck. What happened next? What did this outburst of drama culminate to? Nothing. He sat back down. Old wife chuckled nervously. We continued with speeches. Yes, this was during the "What are you thankful for" roundabout, and all tried to act like it didn't happen. Everyone was thanking the current wife for taking care of him and everything she does. Lots of love. But she was visibly upset, disappointed. Now many years later, he's in a nursing home and she's not. More funny than terrible. My family's foreign friend was celebrating her first American Thanksgiving with us, and she didn't realize the gravy boat wasn't attached to the tray. Her plate was a lake. Whenever she comes back to the US we laugh about it with her. Her brother was also fascinated with our fridge and microwave and actually whipped out a tape measure. Have you ever been betrayed by a fart? Have you ever been betrayed by a fart? In front of your entire family? I would not recommend it. Edit. Of course my highest rated comment is about me shitting myself. Happy Thanksgiving y'all. I can't remember if it was the same Thanksgiving or multiples, but my cousin very quietly told me he'd got a dick piercing of some sort. One of my aunts saw we were talking quietly, and her being loud and obnoxious, made a big deal about it. She started yelling about us talking and found out what we were talking about, and she started tattling to her sister, my cousin with the new piercing's mom, about how he's got his dick pierced, and his mom just said, it stopped being my concern once he was potty trained. And my grandparents had separated earlier in the year. My cousin with the previously mentioned piercing, Asked Grandpa how he liked being alone and not having Grandma around. It was typical at first, and somehow it got to my grandpa complaining about being tricked, convinced into marrying the first thing he stuck his dick in. I was 15/16 years old for all of this. Our dog and the smaller dog we're fostering are pestering my mom all morning while she's making the turkey. To distract them while we eat, she gives them each a chew bone. Not from the turkey. We're 10 minutes into dinner when foster dog steals other dog's bone and gets a nip to the ear for it. Suddenly, the house is a murder scene. Blood splatters the walls as he shakes his head constantly, bothered by the steadily dripping ear. He's small and we keep trying to catch him, but he's diving under the table and behind furniture, all the while dripping blood across the house. I finally grab hold of him and try to apply pressure with my hands. A napkin, a towel, we try to tape a bandage to his ear. To no avail. I'm covered in blood. The house is a macabre Jackson Pollock painting, and my mom runs to the store to get whatever they have to stop bleeding. We put foster dog in a crate to try to contain the blood and start to clean up the floor. It's then we realize my mom's then boyfriend is still at the head of the table, calmly eating his Thanksgiving dinner. Not my Thanksgiving, but my buddy was telling me about how last year his brother asked for a paternity test mid-meal. His brother was 30 at the time. Edit. They did take the test and it determined that there was a 99.999% chance he was the father. Like, did your buddy question whether he was a baby daddy, or was he trying to find out who his baby daddy was? He hates his dad, so he genuinely asked for a paternity test so he could find a way out of the family. My dad farted in the middle of Thanksgiving prayer. That day shall forever be known as Fartgate. My father's phone went off one time during prayer. It was the Jetsons' doorbell. We found out that my mother-in-law's new boyfriend was violently anti-military when he initiated a shouting match with my dad, a retired career Marine. Just after dinner, most of us were standing around the kitchen chatting and they were peacefully playing ping pong on the back patio when a sudden hail of epithets and curse words made us all run to the window. We were all stunned, except for my Mill, who rushed out the back door and dragged the boyfriend through the house, still yelling, and out into the driveway. She told him he couldn't talk to her family that way, broke up with him right then and there on the pavement, and sent him home without any dessert. I'll always remember that because it was the first time she called me family that wasn't in the context of asking me to do her a favor. Meaning, it's the first time she called me family and I felt like she really meant it. I felt sick, so my dad gave me a pill that contained a very large dose of dextromethorphan. Turns out I don't react well to it. I proceeded to spend an hour in the bathroom throwing up. My dad didn't notice because he was too busy dealing with a woman who kept calling his phone and yelling at him in Italian, a language none of us can speak. The rest of the day I was miserable and he was irritated by the repeated phone calls. Still not the worst Thanksgiving I've had. The image of your dad getting repeated calls from an angry Italian woman and getting more and more frustrated arguing with her instead of just not answering the calls is cracking me up lol. My family celebrated Thanksgiving a few days early one year, because my uncle, who we were close to, was moving out of the country and his flight was on Thanksgiving. So, it's the day of, and we're cooking like crazy in our tiny kitchen. We had a strange neighbor, who later caught their house on fire in a meth cooking incident, who often came by and pestered my mom. The morning of our Thanksgiving, she came by and asked for $20, and in return she would spray paint our house number on the curb, for some reason. Anyway, my mom lets her just to get her out of our hair and tells her we're busy. Well, She spray paints the number and leaves. An hour later, we see her stalking around our front yard with a black garbage bag. Our family is mildly freaking out, and my mother goes out and asks her what's wrong. Well, she points to a raccoon sitting in our other neighbor's driveway. It's alive, but pretty obviously sick, because it's just sitting there, with flies buzzing around its head. The woman asked my mother if we have a kitchen knife she could borrow, says she needs to put the poor thing out of its misery. Her plan was to push the raccoon into the plastic bag with a stick, and then stab it to death with our kitchen knife. My mom politely declined, and the woman started freaking out and crying and left. The raccoon sat on the driveway for hours, and now it was ruining our Thanksgiving because it was directly across from our house and, frankly, incredibly depressing. My uncle, an admittedly bizarre person, decided he would fix this. He went down to the meth lady, got the black trash bag from her, and they both pushed the raccoon into the bag. She said, "Do you have the knife?" Which, of course not. My uncle wasn't savage. No. He grabbed the thickest stick he could find and beat this senseless raccoon to death. All the while my 8-year-old self is sobbing and thoroughly traumatized. I didn't watch, but could hear what was going on. 0/10. Would never early Thanksgiving again. My mom left a glass baking dish on a hot burner by mistake. It exploded and sent shards everywhere. I refused to move initially because I was in stocking feet and didn't want another sliced up foot. My 5'2" sister had shoes on, so she tried to come over and lift my 200-pound ass and carry me away from it. XD. I love you sis, but number ends badly. Walked into the garage with my dog and a casserole. My dad's champion show dog came galloping out to meet me, let out a death scream, had a heart attack and died. Tried CPR for 10 minutes. It was clearly dead. He went inside saying, "What did he do?" Grabbed a bottle and left. I picked up the dog and went around to vet clinics for one that was open. The one that was just said, "Yes, he's dead." I've never recovered. It was also my birthday. Jesus Christ, sorry that happened to you. Same thing happened 2 years ago, right before Christmas. I try to not think about it, but it was so horrifying I break down if the memory surfaces. Best dog we ever had. Giant goofy Great Dane. He wasn't even a year old. I have never even heard of that happening. I am so sorry you lost your dog at such a young age. Hugs. I invited my girlfriend over for Thanksgiving when I was in high school. We had had sex together for our first time the night before, and during dinner she abruptly shouted out, "I'm pregnant." I took a test this morning and it's positive. I told you condoms don't work. There was a lot of yelling. I don't remember what all was said, but my older brother knew the night before was our first time and he yelled at her that if she's testing positive it can't be mine. She argued for a minute, but once my older relatives realized what had happened they all started calling her a liar and she eventually left. She even switched schools after that, and apparently she was pregnant with someone else's kid. No matter though, I've felt like the black sheep at every family get-together since, and I have heard the story retold every year for the past 16 years. TLDR. Girlfriend accused me of knocking her up at my family dinner. Wow. She tried to cuck you and failed hard. You should thank your brother, cause if it wasn't for him this year some kid would be interrupting dinner with, "I want a paternity test." Her failure at basic biology is your saving role. Also, it's clear she fucked you as an excuse because she wanted someone to pay for her baby. I think you should turn it around, and while everyone is quietly eating Thanksgiving dinner you should say, "I'm pregnant." A couple of years ago, my brother-in-law set the oven on fire. He had pulled the turkey out of the oven to check the temperature. It still had a ways to go, so back in it went. Except he pushed the pan, not the oven rack. It tilted back and spilled grease which caught fire in a most spectacular fashion. Roaring flames, smoke. 2-year-old nephew and newborn niece are crying. Me, my sister, my ex-girlfriend, and one of my brother-in-law's daughters from his first marriage take the kids outside. My mom, being the quick thinker she is, gets the fire put out quickly without having to use a fire extinguisher. The kicker? The turkey was still undercooked when all was said and done. The visiting drifters, my dad is one of 11 kids. This was in the early 80s when all but 3-4 still lived at home and were in their teens. My older aunts and uncles had kids and we'd play outside. Loud and silly, you know, as kids tend to be. There were always friends of my aunts and uncles who would stop by all the time. They'd just come on in. My grandma was inviting to anyone. No one ever knocked after the first visit. It was rare someone wasn't home. That's the kind of welcoming atmosphere there. Well, in come two guys that could be any age that matches my uncles. They say hi to several people. My grandma says hello and gives them big hugs. We are very informal. Everyone just helps themselves to food, then scrambles to find a seat in the living room or front porch if it was nice. Us kids ate in a big group on the steps. It was as if these guys knew the drill. Lol. Fixed their plates, grabbed a seat in the living room, and made small talk with those around them. Got seconds, stayed and talked for a while, then said they had to be going and threw their plates away and took off. NBD. Lol. We'd seen it before with friends of the family. Later, things had quieted down. They got to playing cards. Someone asked who had brought the new guys. There were a bunch of. Not me. IDK. Never saw them before. Come to find out, no one knew them. Just two guys who guessed we were having Thanksgiving dinner and needed a meal. They figured with all the people, maybe we wouldn't notice. And we didn't. They were clean, nice, friendly, and polite, and we sometimes refer back to them as the traveling drifters. They had big backpacks that they left on the porch when they came in. Not a disastrous incident, but one I like to think of. It reminds me of my grandma's big welcoming heart, giving them big old hugs. She just figured it was one of the kids' friends. Man, I miss that woman. The first time I cooked turkey dinner on my own. This is a long one. First, I cooked everything that I remembered seeing on my grandma's table. Did not think about how other people brought side dishes, so I spent about $400 for one meal. This was 35 years ago. In the middle of my cooking spree, my spouse and brother decide to go work on a car or something, leaving me alone with our 5-year-old. My sister-in-law calls. My little nephew had locked himself in the bathroom and she couldn't get him out. She's panicking. I turn off the burners and leave the turkey cooking while I take my son and jump in my car to go to the rescue. As soon as I hit the key, I knew something was not right. I heard thumping from under the hood. I clicked the key off, jumped out and opened the hood to find what was left of our two cats who had crawled into the engine compartment. Surprisingly, they were both alive. One dropped to the driveway and the other took off like a bat out of hell. Just then, the men of the family show up. Brother was sent off to rescue his wayward son and spouse bundled up the cat we could find and took him to the vet. I wasn't too excited about driving. My son was crying and I comforted him as I finished cooking the damn dinner. We invited just a few people, but they had big appetites. I watched $400 worth of food disappear in about 1 hour. One guy ate 3 helpings of everything. I just watched him in awe. The cat that was taken to the vet survived, although with one eye less than he was born with. The other cat hid away from us until all of his wounds became infected and then showed up at the back door looking like it just stepped out of a horror movie. He didn't make it, and that was my first Thanksgiving dinner prepared on my own. Our shitty oven went into self-cleaning mode and locked itself somehow while my mother's turkey she had worked so hard on was inside. The oven then turned itself up to about 500 degrees to begin the cleaning process and almost burned our turkey to a crisp. After realizing what was going on, my mother began pounding on the glass and yelling like she was watching an inmate receive the death penalty. Fortunately, my father was able to jimmy the lock open with a screwdriver. The oven wouldn't turn off, so we just left the door half open and let it finish cooking. The turkey had a nice crunch on the outside that year, and needless to say my mom was able to convince my dad to get her all new appliances for the following Christmas. Ever try to find an oven heating element on Thanksgiving Day? My dad did one year. We arrive at my aunt's house in Palm Springs the night before Thanksgiving. She has ordered a grocery store pre-made dinner. Okay, fine. However, she didn't make room in her refrigerator and had to put the turkeys and all the sides outside on her patio furniture. Enter my dad. Dad, oh, we could never do that at our house. The raccoons would be all over that food in 2 minutes. Aunt, we are fine. I haven't seen a raccoon out there in years. Cue the music dun dun dunnn. I am a teenager and I am hanging out in the kitchen that has a sliding glass door facing the back patio furniture with our Thanksgiving dinner. All of the adults are there with me and we are all talking. My little sister was in the next room playing video games. After a little while, she enters the kitchen, waits for a lull in the conversation, and proceeds to announce, "Sister, the raccoons are eating everyone." Ugh. Everyone rushes outside to scare away a pack of raccoons. We seriously interrupted one of them chomping away on a drumstick. My aunt, bless her soul, was always in charge. She proceeded to throw out that turkey and put the other turkey in side dishes into her garage. Her brother, my uncle, arrives the following day with a beautiful prime rib and a fresh raccoon paw-free salad. My parents, my sister, my cousin and myself had prime rib and salad for dinner that year and nothing else. Everyone else, except for my aunt, unknowingly had raccoon leftovers. Halfway through the dinner, my cousin and I looked down at the far end of the table to see my sister growling and snarling at us with lettuce hanging out of her mouth similar to this GFCAT web page. That was our raccoon Thanksgiving in Palm Springs. My racist grandfather didn't want my Native American girlfriend over. It was like 15 years ago. I still remember it clearly due to how sadly ironic it was. My grandfather was trying to put his foot down and get my cousins to listen to him at the family Thanksgiving meal. He exclaimed, "I'm the intimate authority," when meaning to say that he was the ultimate authority. We all burst out laughing after. Needless to say, that undermined any authority he was trying to establish at the moment. Our oven, for some ungodly reason, decided to randomly turn off mid-cooking the turkey. I caught it early, so I turned it back on. Turns off again. So I had to sit in front of the damn oven all afternoon watching a damn turkey cook by turning the oven on every time it turned off. When I was 16 I got a wheat brownie from my dealer. I had never done edibles before so I was super excited. I decided to eat it before Thanksgiving so I would have a nice high and all this good food to eat. He warned me that it was strong and to only eat half of it. I ate the half and after like 15 minutes I wasn't feeling anything, so I decided to eat the other half too. I didn't know that with edibles it takes a while to kick in and wasn't instant like smoking. By the time dinner came by I was very stoned, like too much for my own comfort. My aunt and uncle were there too, along with my little cousin who was like 4 at the time. I was so stoned that I could not look at anyone, so I just awkwardly stared at my food and gave one-word answers when my family tried to talk to me. It made things incredibly uncomfortable for everyone. After about 20 minutes I could not take it anymore, so I just picked up my plate and went downstairs to my room. My mom followed me and wanted to know what the hell was wrong with me. I admitted to her that I ate a weed brownie and was incredibly stoned and asked if she could just leave me alone because I was too high to deal with things right now. She was cool about it and waited until I came down to yell at me about ruining Thanksgiving dinner. I ate the half and after like 15 minutes I wasn't feeling anything. So I decided to eat the other half too. As a guy who's eaten weed brownies before, I felt the doom in this sentence. My first eye curled up in the corner of my bedroom, bawling. I remember thinking what are thoughts made of? Of course I realized that in and of itself was a thought. I believed that I would be stuck in that loop forever. Always hyper aware that my thoughts were thoughts and that I was thinking them. My loop was made of time. An infinite loop of time that I was eternally stuck in. It suddenly all made a horrible, precise sense. One of my roommates came home with his girlfriend and they bookended me where I was laying in the fetal position. That roommate is now quite a famous guy, and I always think, oh, that was my friend who helped me when I got so high that time wouldn't restart. Also, mirrors aren't supposed to change colors. Edit. For those folks asking who the famous guy is, he is a dude pretty well placed in the politics scene. Kinda got that Obama feeling about him. Like maybe I'm gonna see my former roommate be president a decade or two. More edit. Sorry guys, it wasn't Beto. Had a time experience as well. I could remember everything perfectly from 6 seconds ago. The issue came to be that once I remembered everything perfectly from 6 seconds ago, I had to remember the 6 seconds before that. Thankfully this was on the ride back from a chicken nugget run and my friend saved me from the burden of total recall. Ate a brownie while I was lifting. Freshly shaved mohawk. Big beard. Got lost in the mirror pretending to be Zangief for about an hour making selection screen poses. Every edible story. Not high. Still not high. Still not high. I guess I feel a little hungry. I'm dying, please help me. I felt that doom after I ate the half because I could already tell where it was going. Had a friend eat 2 full brownies because he wasn't feeling anything when we were at a party. He just sat in the chair all night, barely able to process reality until he finally came down. Basically the I need more because I don't feel anything yet thought process is terrible for most substances and should always be avoided. I remember when my friend drank liquor for the first time and didn't feel anything after his first mixed drink, so he decided to start downing Everclear. He paused in the middle of a conversation, held up his finger, walked to the bathroom, and vomited. He was in there for the next 24-ish hours. I could feel the sympathetic winces from Redditors worldwide upon reading this bit. My 58-year-old brother has come to every single family holiday in Eastern since he was 14. My niece was dating this SHPOS of a person, con man, liar, druggie. He was in his late 30s dating a girl in her early 20s. 2 kids with 1 on the way, a real piece of work. He was teaching his sons to be misogynistic sexist jerks. He denied his daughter was his even though she looked exactly like him in drag. My sister and this guy got into an argument on Thanksgiving. him basically calling her genetic trash, and they started yelling at each other. My brother, my niece's father, had the tryptophan haze going on and woke up to the yelling. He went to get his gun to escort this sob out permanently. He knocked over my mother who had just had rotator cuff surgery. I fought my brother for the gun. Not to save dickhead's life, but to preserve my brother's, and got it away from him. Dickhead and my niece left. I told everyone get out of my way. I'm getting my fucking coat. Grabbed my sister and we left. The police was called, but everyone had gone by the time they show up. This started a family fight that lasted almost 10 years. My niece started telling lies about my sister. My brother and sister stopped talking and then dickhead exposed himself to my nephew's daughter. Niece finally realized this guy was not worth the value of the raw materials he was made of, and had him legally written out of the picture. She finally apologized for spreading lies. It was just last year with my dad almost dying that my brother and sister started talking again. After 14 years, you know what my parents remember? Me saying fuck in my brother's house. Way to keep your eye on the ball. Dickhead died in September. We can't figure out if someone shot him or if he shot himself. Either way, the world is better off and this will be a happier Thanksgiving for his absence. Way to keep your eye on the ball. I can hear this in my dad's exasperated little league coach voice, and it is my now go-to for low-key insults. Thank you. Oof, too many to list. The worst though definitely has to be the time my grandmother tried killing herself because my uncle wouldn't take leftovers home. There were obviously some bigger issues, but that was as much as 8-year-old me could comprehend. This is a late reply BC. I only saw it once. It made the front page, but maybe it could be upvoted so others can see a seatbelt warning. My 17-year-old nephew died in a car wreck in the very early hours of Thanksgiving 2016. He was a passenger in a car driven by another kid, who was driving way too fast and lost control. They hit a culvert on the side of the road and the car flipped. My nephew, who was not wearing his seatbelt, went through the sunroof and the car rolled over on him. Our family Thanksgiving was always done by myself, his mother. We Southern, so it was always a big deal, because us Southern folks love to cook and eat. Lol. It had always been the happiest and most bonding family event, but now, it is one of the hardest times of the year to go through. The death of one of the kids in the family has affected all of our relationships. Everything is different now. This time of year is just really hard now. We all try to make Thanksgiving what it once was, but our grief still comes out in different ways. Anyone who reads this, you'll buckle your damn selves in. No matter if you're 5 minutes away or 500 miles away, don't make your family go through this. Giant family gathering. The host's house is right alongside an extremely popular street that has a speed limit of 50 miles per hour. We're eating turkey when we hear a large amount of slams and car alarms. We go outside to see that all of our cars are completely trashed. Our family's car was at the end because we were late. Therefore we had only a small dent and a lot of scratches. However, out of our family's 11 vehicles, only 2 were able to be driven. The rest were totaled. We found out a couple months later that one of the host's friends got completely drunk and decided to drive his large 4x4 Ford truck and slammed all of us. The host never told the police and forgave the drunk driver because he was a close friend. He hit my grandpa's van so hard the roof was curved inwards into a giant V. I was about 8, my sister 14. My grandpa was making the stuffing and cut himself pretty bad. My dad had to take him to the hospital. My mom finished making the stuffing. Dad and grandpa make it back home in time for dinner. Grandpa's finger is all wrapped up. Dad said it was a pretty deep cut. We proceed to eat dinner. About 1/2 way through, my sister spit her food out, and there on the plate was the very tip of my grandpa's finger. Little slice of fingernail included. My dad didn't realize my mom had used the stuffing my grandpa had made, so saw no reason to upset people and tell them my grandpa had cut off his finger. Growing up at the large family Thanksgiving, I was a picky eater, so lovingly a bowl of green jello was made for me. Over the years that bowl of green jello showed up, and over the years my taste buds changed and I no longer needed it made especially for you. Fast forward to my first small Thanksgiving with just my wife and I, in my first house. I sit down at the table with a big grin on my face and happily say, finally a Thanksgiving with no green jello made especially for me. At that exact moment my wife puts down a large bowl of green jello and says, your mother called. She said you loved it. Thanksgiving 2011. We're all gathered around the dinner table letting our food settle after eating when suddenly a bat flies into the room and creates absolute chaos. The whole family starts trying to capture the bat using anything we had. Blankets, sheets, umbrellas, brooms, you name it. Eventually one of us knocked it out of the air with a broom and scooped it out the door. The next year we decorated with bat-themed decorations, and it's been a tradition we've kept up since. Everyone remembers the bat incident fondly. It really brought us together as a family. I've got video of the incident that I can post in the morning if this gets any interest. Edit. OP delivers. Here's the video for your enjoyment. Streamable. Video for publisher's webpage. By about 4 p.m. I had lost the ability to remember or control what I said. During our family prayer, I was able to use some ridiculously high-level vocabulary correctly, and the phrase "somebody light me up" I'm too deep. Needless to say, I woke up on the ground in an empty room at 6:45 p.m. with both parents shaking me awake asking why I was mumbling I'm drowning in the River Thames. There is a video of me that floats around the family every year of a liquor drink I had filled with paper towels. I kept trying to drink from this plastic cup all afternoon. Every attempted swig was followed with an outlandish look and another attempt at drinking some more. Edit. The day began with mimosas and jello shots at 9. Shortly after, my extended family started noticing how drunk I was getting. The new game turned into let's see how messed up we can get him before dinner. I believe my drink of choice was rum and coke, 80/20 mix. My cousin got drunk and tried to kiss me. I was 15, he was 18, it was gross and I haven't seen him since. Me, Dad, and older sister got almost 3 bottles of wine down when we realized there was no meat thermometer in the house. Ended up raiding the garage to see what we could find that would work on the turkey. Keep in mind that we were drunk enough that my sister magically had a Scottish accent. I sounded like I was from Fargo and my poor dad had the worst Mexican accent on the planet. We couldn't get the outdoor thermometer close enough to the turkey to get a good read. The infrared thermometer gun said the stream was hot but not hot enough. We decided as a family that the voltmeter said it was okay to eat. I was so drunk I don't even know if it gave off a charge or not, but we didn't die. Edit. We reference this incident every Thanksgiving now. Also, formatting. Last year, we, Mom, stepdad and I, drove 8 hours to my step-aunt's house. I brought a pie. I was kind and polite, humored my teenage step-cousins, and was in general a lovely guest. I've known these people since I was a kid, and the cousins since they were born. My stepdad's mom kept harassing him about a private matter, and wouldn't leave him alone. She kept asking why he wouldn't talk about it, and he repeated several times that it was not a thing to discuss at Thanksgiving. In any case, she finally cornered him for the last time after the meal. really laying into him. He kept saying he just wanted to have a nice time. They could discuss it later. His sister suddenly flies off the couch like a bitch out of hell and starts yelling, how dare he treat an old lady this way? We invited you into our house. You're a horrible human. How could you ruin Thanksgiving like this? etc etc. I quietly got my stuff and walked towards the door while she was screaming, only for her usually soft-spoken husband to suddenly yell, okay, it's time for you guys to get the hell out. He pushes us towards the door. While they are still screaming at us, my stepdad's sister actually slams the door in our face. I was so shocked that I just stood there at the doorstep while my mom silently cried. Even worse, I realized my special jacket was left behind. We had to double back and get my stepdad's other sister to bring it out, which took ages as no one would answer our calls. Worst Thanksgiving ever. TL. Our stepdad's sister throws a fit after their mom harasses my stepdad, and we get screamed at and kicked out. TLDR. Locked myself in my apartment with a turkey out of spite. My brother saved the holiday. We lost him to cancer 2 years ago today. Hug your loved ones while you can. My mother and I used to share a house. We had separate apartments. She lived downstairs and I lived upstairs. She's notoriously unreliable, and on the few occasions she was responsible for family dinners we didn't eat until nearly 10 at night, so I managed all of those events for our family. One year on Thanksgiving I took advantage of our living arrangement and made the turkey, stuffing, cranberry sauce, and mashed potatoes in my apartment while pies and veg sides were cooking in hers. Efficient, right? As our family and friends gathered they came to my apartment, but she never came up, so people mingled back and forth. I have a large, full dining set, and formal china, and have traditionally hosted, so I set the table and didn't think anything of it. When the turkey was done I gave everyone a heads up, and at some point my mother started to drag her feet about coming upstairs. I asked directly if she didn't want to come up, never thinking it was actually an issue for her to travel on the holiday, and she said that she didn't want to eat upstairs as planned, even though I'd already set the table. I was going through a divorce and trying to create some semblance of normal family time, and I lost my shit. I said, oh, okay, then all of you can eat green beans and pie without me, and turned around, walked upstairs and locked myself in my apartment with the turkey. Certainly unreasonable, but I was tired from cooking, always having to manage holidays, and very emotional because of the divorce. I don't know when my rage turned to sadness, but I cried upstairs, alone with my turkey, until my brother came upstairs and tried to open the door. When he realized it was locked he essentially talked me down, and eventually my mother offered to come up and I offered to come down. Thanksgiving was saved. My brother was always good like that. He passed away 2 years ago today. Miss him like crazy. Families can be hard and holidays can be trying. Hug the people you love extra tight anyway. When I was a little kid playing out in my grandma's yard, a turkey flew by overhead and landed right on the roof of her house. My 70-something-year-old aunt got blackout drunk and my family almost had her all the way back to her apartment when she actually passed out, and they had to try to carry her up the stairs. They ended up letting her lie on the stairs till they could rouse her enough to crawl the rest of the way up. It was great. Last Thanksgiving, took an edible, Chiba Chews, God bless em, before going to my wife's family's house for Thanksgiving dinner. Her parents and her 2 younger siblings, 19-20, were there, along with her uncle and her aunt, who is in a wheelchair due to MES. Anyways, I'm pretty stoned at this point, but full of functioning and having a great time. The kids were sitting at one end of the table, having our own conversation about jokes. My wife's brother, who's kind of an idiot, throws out the joke to me, what's the worst part about eating vegetables, and right as he delivers the punchline, it's eating around the wheelchair. It got quiet, so the rest of the family heard. The aunt just goes, what was that about wheelchairs? He clearly wasn't thinking before he said the joke. It wasn't aimed at his aunt or anything. He just wasn't thinking. And he just gets so red and looks at me, and I'm about to suffocate from holding in my laughter. For the next hour I had the stoned giggles. I could not stop. It was like when you're being class and trying so hard not to laugh. It was awful. No one heard the start of that joke, so we couldn't really say what was going on. Anyways, Thanksgiving was fantastic. Well, there was one year where we argued over Muppets, how to defrost satellite dishes, took apart the cabinets and ended the night by flinging carrots at each other. About 10 years ago, my mom was hosting a Thanksgiving dinner and had just finished a nice, big, and juicy turkey. She put it right on the countertop next to the oven to cool. Guests were going to arrive very soon, and went upstairs to do some errands. The turkey looked absolutely delicious, and my mouth was watering. I also went upstairs to my room and waited for the guests to arrive. About 10 minutes later, I heard an unbelievably loud scream coming from downstairs. I rushed down, went into the kitchen, and saw my mom cursing at my dog at the top of her lungs. She was hitting my dog with a rolled up newspaper. She threw slippers and slightly hard objects at my dog. I had legitimately never seen her act that way, since my dog was a sweetheart and was loved by all. Passed away 5 years ago though. Well, apparently, the smell of the turkey enticed my then 8-year-old Labrador Pointer mix. Don't have any pictures of her, but she looked very close to this 101 dog breeds webpage. So what did my dog do? She stood on her hind legs, with her front legs leaning on the countertop, and started eating away at the fucking turkey. By the time my mom caught her, a quarter of the front of the bird had been eaten. Thankfully it was only meat and no bones. The guests were about to arrive, and the dinner table was set with all the appetizers and sides, all except for the turkey. So what did my mom do? She cut off a small section of meat, separating the chewed meat from the clean meat, and then served the clean meat. And unbelievably, it was still delicious. We always tell that story at every Thanksgiving. Haha. My family went out for a walk one Thanksgiving after the meal, to let our stomachs settle before dessert. We came home to find our beagle up on the table, almost fully inside what was left of the turkey. He did eat some bones, but the boy had a cast iron stomach. He was fine. I have a wholesome one. My cousin went through a phase where he would only wear one beat up outfit to school. And one year for Thanksgiving, the teachers pulled together and got him a turkey so his family could have a decent Thanksgiving. His family was decently well off, but he just looked like they needed support because he wouldn't wear anything else. Well, 7-year-old me found out, unbeknownst to everyone else, and decided to say in the middle of holiday dinner, Kevin, I heard about the turkey. Everyone lost it. And now for the last 15 years, everyone reminds him multiple times every season that we all heard about the turkey. He started wearing other clothes after that, lol. Growing up from age 3-7, there was a girl about my age that was the daughter of my aunt's friend. We were total besties. Anyways, one Thanksgiving her and I are running in and out of the house playing tag. I recall chasing her when bang, she runs right into the glass sliding door, and I kid you not, the whole top half shatters and she's just laying over the bottom half, damn near impaled by the shards. She was literally dangling and stuck on the glass. I still can't believe that happened. Poor girl. She had to get stitches all across her belly. We saw each other year after year, but it felt so odd and I felt like it was my fault. I told my wife's uncle that if he said another rude thing to my mother-in-law, I was going to beat him down. We were at the table with the whole family, my wife, her parents, grandparents, uncles, and the offending uncle's wife and kids. That was 2 years ago and I'll be seeing him for the first time since then on Thursday. Wish me luck. 2 I can think of. My aunt, several alcoholic beverages in at the time, knocked over her very full wine glass into the fresh bowl of nearly 20 pounds of mashed potatoes. She had been the first, and only, one to be served the potatoes. Thanksgiving ruined. The year my grandmother passed, we were all in the dining room sitting down to dinner. My grandfather said the prayer, and as soon as everyone had said amen, the old grandfather clock in the corner of the room started chiming. Everyone froze. That clock hadn't worked in years and I've never heard it chime since, almost 13 years later. My mother always told me the story of how when she was younger one night she also woke up from the old grandfather's clock that hasn't worked for years, and the next morning she found out that her mom had passed away to cancer in the night. Is it just me, or like a grandfather's clock is always like an omen or a portal to another world? Last year my uncle burned the turkey when he tried to deep fry it. That was funny. Once one of my aunts was supposed to bring some type of seafood, I'm pretty sure it was crab, and didn't, claiming she couldn't afford it. It made my other aunties upset when she started bragging about planned vacations and expensive trips later in the evening. But they didn't say anything. It boiled over when they caught her trying to take all of the leftover seafood dishes and ended with her and my mom nearly fighting in the front lawn. That was also funny. Halfway through eating, my cousin's boyfriend proposed to her in front of 40 plus family and extended family members. She said number. It was after dinner and everyone was taking our pre-dessert break to clean up and get ready. Dessert is serious. My father is sitting at the head of the table watching the game on TV past the other end. I am dozing on the couch. My mother walks in from the kitchen, pauses, and blankly says the table is on fire. I perk up and sure enough, someone had knocked a candle over and the tablecloth was on fire. My father was watching the game through the flames and didn't notice. Thankfully it was put out quickly and we still give him crap over his obliviousness. The year grandma went low carb with no advance warning. 1 dozen-ish relatives staying with Grandma Baba Yaga and her wonderful, adorable mother. The year GBY decided to ditch carbs in a haphazard fashion. Mashed yams were substituted for mashed potatoes. The stuffing disappeared. Pumpkin pie was replaced by pumpkin mousse, which anesthetized everybody's tongues via brandy and far too much clove. Nobody expected the low-carb onset. All the stores were closed. A dozen people simmered in a hypoglycemic snit for hours. I was a young adult, mid-20s. Good job turning into a career. Bought a nice neck apartment. Growing up, we'd always had dinner with my mom's little sister, my aunt. We're all there chatting and eating appetizers. My brother is running late, but he's always late. He lives up in Scarsdale and has more traffic to deal with. It's all normal chit chat until I catch my uncle making a nasty crack about my brother's tardiness to my mother, which upsets her. She's easily upset and the uncle knows this. It was a pointless, nasty crack. It served only to upset my mother suddenly, like Proust's Madeleines. Memories of him doing this to my mother for my entire life came flooding back. I was immediately upset. I waited until he was alone in the kitchen and I casually but quite seriously squared up to him. I told that him if he ever spoke to my mother like that again and embarrassed her in front of her family that I'd be dead fucking sure to embarrass him in front of his family. If that meant breaking my size 12 foot off in his ass, I'd be more than happy to oblige him. Moreover, that I wasn't a little kid anymore and his days of bullying my mother because nobody was backing her up were fucking over. Then I smiled, patted him on the shoulder and went back out to the appetizers. He was real quiet during dinner. Didn't really look up from his plate. We stopped having Thanksgiving together soon after. I have to give some backstory for this one, and X200B. So, my grandmother loved hitting garage and estate sales. She had a bit of a hoarding problem, but she also loved spoiling us grandkids, and preferred to get a deal on said spoiling. She had tactics that would make normal people tremble in fear if she showed up at their sale. The sale in question, she rolled up near the end of the stated time, did a quick perusal of the joint, and said, "I'll pay you $50 for everything," did some more snooping, found a box in the guy's garage, and insisted he take $5 for it. She was old. She pulled the grandma card. He caved. Well, one Thanksgiving, my GMA is at my cousin's house for dinner. My aunt, her adult children, their children, uncle, his wife, and GMA are the people there. Dinner has winded down, and people are doing the laser thing, sitting around and talking cause there's nothing on TV worth watching, etc. GMA remembers that she lent my cousin's husband a box of videotapes that she snagged at a garage sale over the summer for us, my siblings and I, but that she was going to have him look through first to see if there were any not PG-13 videos in the box. In my cousin's husband's defense, he totally forgot about the box, never looked in it, just stuck it off to the side and spaced. People are like, yeah, let's watch a movie, what all is in there? And GMA goes, well, there's a variety. From what I saw, guy didn't want to sell them to me at all. I had to fight for them for the girls, but we'll see. At least one of them seemed to be educational. Kind of a touristy kind of video on parts of Texas. She then went to the box, pulled out the tape she was looking for, and pushed it into the VCR and hit play. As the blank part of the tape at the beginning was scrolling through, she got herself settled back down in her seat. You know, this sounds like it'd be a good one. It's been a long time since her husband last took me to Dallas. I'd like to see what's changed. Dallas, yeah, this girl did it to a video on Dallas, Texas. Sounds very educational. Good for the girls to see. Cue the family all jumping up out of their seats, trying to eject the tape before any of the actual video starts playing, and therefore submitting my cousin's little kids to Does Dallas, then them having to explain to GMA was pornies, and why these tapes weren't good for us girls, ages say 6-10, and that my cousin's husband will just give her the $5 she spent on them and destroy them for her. She still was ticked off, apparently remembered who sold her the box, and tried to get my uncle to drive her over to give him an earful for having such filth in his house, let alone selling it to an unsuspecting old woman. Despite her story of how she bought it stating that he refused to sell it to her, but she shoved a $5 bill in his hand, said I'm not taking no for an answer, picked up the box, and tossed it in her car. One of the more hilarious stories told about her at her wake. She was a total card, and missed every day. Thanksgiving 2006. I had a cousin who bullied me throughout my adolescence. He was 20 years older, for being overweight and being a goth. Made my life pretty difficult. I grew up and on Thanksgiving I saw him beginning to do it to my little sister, who was 12. Then he sent his 5-year-old son in to do it for him and I lost my shit. Marched into the kitchen, Told him to fuck off and leave my sister alone. Unloaded on him about the trauma he caused me, and just generally cussed him out and tore him a new asshole. My father jumped in and it nearly came to blows. My mom and aunt were in tears. I left the house. My father and sister followed, and my mom soon after. We didn't spend a holiday with them for years. We call it Yardbird and tossed salad. My mom has borderline personality disorder. When I was 5, our heating element in our oven broke. My mom told my dad to fix it, but he never did. She made all the sides waiting for him to get home the day of Thanksgiving. He didn't show on time, so she proceeded to get shit-faced on wine while sobbing hysterically. My dad eventually showed with my uncle and a smoked turkey. The thought of an on-oven baked turkey enraged my mom and she started throwing all the sides against the wall. I remember being really bummed because I'd never had cranberry sauce before and wanted to try it. My dad and uncle grabbed me, threw me in the truck, and drove off. My mom chased after the truck and threw the turkey at it. Yardbird and tossed salad. Mice almost caught the oven on fire. Mill had been making a sweet potato casserole and pulled it out of the oven, asking Sil to put some marshmallows on top and then put it back to let them get all toasted and melty and stuff. Sil dumps the entire bag of mini marshmallows on top of the casserole dish and sticks it back in the oven. A few minutes later, we smell burning sugar. The marshmallows had puffed up and then started to melt all down the sides of the casserole dish and dripped onto the bottom of the oven colon. I've posted about my situation before, but this year it gets so much goddamn better. So let's buckle the fucking friends. So my dad has been married 3 times. Wife 1 is my brother's mom. Wife 2 is my sister's mom. Baby mama was my mom. And wife 3 is a foreign-born psychopath who has between 3-5 children. Boundary issues. And such a strong history of lying that we don't know anything about her past despite her being married to my daddy for 30 years. So 3 years ago, wife 1, Carol, for the sake of the story, lost her 3rd or 4th husband, the motorcycle riding preacher Pumpkin, and her dad on the same day, which obviously fucked up her feels, which is understandable. Except Carol decided to focus those feels on my brother since he is her only child and started to follow him to my family events. A family she hasn't been a part of in literally 42 years. Like she invited herself to my sister's wedding. So my dad shows up with wife 3, greets wife 2 because it's their daughter getting married, and suddenly sees Carol, wife 1, standing there, and we are all WTFing and trying to not let the awkwardness overwhelm us before we manage to get buzzed enough to deal with it. In a hoe. This year Carol has decided that she will yet again attend a family event for a family she hasn't belonged to in 42 years, but this time, oh this fucking time, this crazy bitch wants to bring her live-in unemployed boyfriend to her ex-husband's mother's house for a goddamn family holiday. To clarify, it's not like I dislike Carol. Everyone dislikes Carol. It's not one of those Hallmark things where she and daddy stayed close for the sake of the kids, and even though she's divorced, she's still part of the family. No. She spent 39 years 100% not being part of our family because of divorce and the fact both of them remarried multiple times. Well, Carol attending was being discussed in the whole family group chat, and she's bringing a congealed salad and boyfriend is bringing greens. I clarified that she is bringing her boyfriend to our celebration, and my aunt said yes and we should be nice. Oh, Danny boy here had some fireball shots and a couple of glasses of wine and then some weird yet delicious Christmas punch earlier in the evening. So I trotted over to the petty group chat of my sister, my favorite cousin, and me to bitch. Me bitching is so goddamn Carol is bringing her jobless boyfriend to our fucking holiday because no one wants to tell her to get the fuck out here with that nonsense exclamation point. That's utter bullshit, but at least daddy will feel as awkward and terrible as we feel having to put up with his cunt wife. I swear to God, if I have to make conversation with Carol, her boyfriend, or stepmom without pure whiskey in my hand, I will kill myself. Except, I sent that massive email to the family group chat, so now my aunt isn't talking to me for saying goddamn. My dad is pissed because I called his wife a cunt. My stepmom is pissed because she's a cunt. My brother is mad because I was talking shit about his mom. And my gram is mad because I said cunt and that I pissed everyone off, but gram says if I don't come to Thanksgiving to deal with the awkwardness I created, she'll whoop me, and I may be 30 years old, but I listen to my gram. So you'll pray I stay drunk enough to survive Thursday and Friday. Update 1. I'm at Gram's. I've had 3 bottles of locally made muscadine wine with my favorite cousin and a gentleman Jack and Diet Cokes with my papaw. So far my stepmom tried to be rude, but I told her in Spanish to stop talking shit or I'd tell everyone what she's saying when she's muttering about them in Spanish. I brought my dad some craft beer so he's done being upset with me. Now we wait for the big day tomorrow. Update 2. My brother is ignoring me, but my cousins think the whole incident was hilarious. Carol and her boyfriend aren't coming, thank God. Now on to the second bottle of champagne so I can become toasted enough that my stepmother's accent becomes a background buzz instead of actually having to listen to her. Let's hope I manage to maintain that balance of buzz until the turkey is ready and I can just eat until I'm so full that a nap or dying are my only options. Unrelated note, my niece is obsessed with my black velvet loafers and thinks I'm the coolest person here. She's not wrong, but the shoes are more of an indication that I'm the gayest person here. Final update. We made it through the holiday without any fisticuffs or me drunkenly screaming thundercunt at my bitchy cousin or bringing up anyone's divorces. So it was pretty successful. I did have to painfully explain to my youngest niece that I couldn't marry her teacher even though we would be the cutest couple because I prefer Stephans not Stephanies. I also had a convo with my sil about how I need my 12-year niece to not play matchmaker for me because I already have every eligible gay Methodist thrust on my gram. Well, Carol attending was being discussed in the whole family group chat and she's being a congealed salad. I know it's just an innocent typo, but I can't stop laughing. I mean, Carol is about as exciting as a congealed salad, so it works in both levels, haha. 1. This was a goddamn delight to read. That other commenter with the editorial critique can go fuck him herself. This was a good time and we all know it. 2. I will think of you probably every hour on Thanksgiving, but here's the deal about being the family trusteler. Don't backpedal. Secretly, everyone's glad that someone blurted out those hard truths that nobody else had the courage to address like adults. Sure, you could have used better language while mediating this clusterfuck. But, as someone who has often carried the burden of being the designated family asshole who's saying what everyone was thinking, I vote you don't let them scapegoat you for all the bullshit they caused. Your reaction is a consequence of their actions. Don't let them hang all the blame on you just because you said some bad words. Just watch the intoxication so you have a little stable footing if they try to go for the jugular. You got this. Hahaha, I've been that bitch for years at family gatherings. My bottle of wine and I have been commenting on divorces and illegitimate children over turkey for years, haha. There is something so exhilarating about talking about how trashy someone's divorce had gotten over a meal served on fine china and eaten with heirloom silver. My mother decided she didn't want a traditional Thanksgiving. So she made us what we each wanted. Pizza, enchiladas and buffalo wings. But my father didn't appreciate that. When he saw the other foods displayed on the table, He started shouting how it's against the law to not eat turkey and how we offended God. He was a heavy alcoholic and went missing the days before on a bender. His lack of eating and sleep triggered his tantrum. Phil got tipsy and started getting all melodramatic and shitty with his sons and his wife. I got up to remove myself from that shit show and started washing dishes when I heard a thimp. Turned around and my Sue and his dad are throwing fists on the living room floor. We had a German exchange student living with us at the time. His first Thanksgiving experience. Yay. So he and a buddy of ours separated them. Dad swayed out of the house yelling like an asshole. The mom was wailing and inconsolable. Eventually so drove his mom and youngest brother back to their house since their dad took the car and left them stranded at ours. Me, the German, and the so's middle brother proceeded to get sideways on wine and polished off all the cheese I bought for a cheese platter that we never got to. Yay Thanksgiving. Yay, I finally have a story to tell. Before I begin, my parents have since admitted they were wrong and we laugh about this now. In my parents' house the dining room table was big enough to fit 10 comfortably. We could do 14. But you would be just about elbow to elbow with the people next to you. The table could be extended, but the dining room itself was too small to fit the larger table. Every time, in 20 plus years we had the table, when we extended the table, we would move it into the great room, so there would be more space. Moving the table also meant we had moved some other furniture out of the way, so it was kind of hassle to do. Usually for Thanksgiving we had around 10-12 people, so we never needed to extend the table. However, this year my aunt's family was in town, so there would be 16. Thursday morning, I asked my mom and sisters if they could watch the parade in the other room so that we can start moving furniture out of the way and get the table set up. I'm told I'm being ridiculous and the table will fit in the dining room. Again, we have had the table 20 plus years. It doesn't fit in the dining room. Everyone knows this. I keep pointing this out and reminding everyone that the extended table doesn't fit in the dining room. I'm constantly overridden. The day goes on and eventually comes time to set the table. After we extend the table I make my point again. And at this point it should be clear to everyone that it doesn't fit. But no, I'm being ridiculous and we will make it work. So the table is set and my parents finally look at it and realize that it doesn't fit. I point out that I've been saying that all day, but am ignored. So now we have to move the table. After we clear out all of the other furniture, I start clearing off the table. My parents ask why I'm doing that and I say we can't move a table with all of the place settings on it. Again, I'm being ridiculous and the decision is made to move the already set table. So it's me, my oldest sister, her fiance, my youngest sister, and my dad moving the table. As soon as we pick it up, it wobbles and the first wine glass goes down. I again suggest clearing the table, and again am called ridiculous. We continue moving. More wobbling and 2 more wine glasses and 1 water glass break. When we try to make the turn to get out of the dining room, more glasses break and the centerpiece vase tips over and cracks. Water is now all over the table. I can barely contain myself from not laughing at this. After much hardship and more breakage, we finally get the table positioned. Final tally: 9 wine glasses, 7 water glasses, 1 dinner plate, 1 bread plate, and the centerpiece vase broken or cracked. The vase was my grandmother's, so my mom is not happy. The table is wet and covered in broken glass, so it has to be cleared and reset with different placemats and dishes. Somehow, my parents tried to blame me for what happened despite the fact I was pointing out that the table needed to be moved all day. Dinner is a little tense, which I admit to antagonizing by eating off of my original unbroken place setting. The good things is, my sisters and I all chipped in and bought our mom new flatware and glasses for Christmas. My aunt started laughing about how much her father, my mom's dad, disliked my dad's father. She started making fun of him for having been disabled and on disability. My dad, who isn't easy to cry, starts tearfully defending his father, reminding her that his father, a WWII vet, was disabled during a mechanical accident while fixing planes for the Air Force. Later he told me he knew my maternal grandpa never liked him, my dad, that much, but dad had no idea my maternal grandpa thought such terrible things about my paternal grandpa. My family kind of just watched in horror as this went down. Me and my brother trying to comfort my dad, my mom keeping to herself trying not to take sides, and my aunt's husband being speechless that she would ever say such a terrible thing. Of course, this was right after she freaked out of me because she found out I was seeing a guy who had a black stepfather and couldn't decide if interracial relationships or divorce was worse. She's coming again this Thanksgiving, by the way, so I have that to look forward to. All day, all my young nieces and nephews were playing and getting along. My father-in-law started play fighting with my nephew and my nephew started crying out of sheer terror, and because my father-in-law hurt him from roughhousing to rough, he would abruptly loudly yell for the kids to be quiet in the middle of everyone having conversation. Throughout the day he just became more and more frustrated with everything, huffing and puffing, walking so hard past people so they would move out of his way. Finally he yelled super loud again, and my sister-in-law told him to knock it off. He is her dad. My mother-in-law told them both to stop. My sister-in-law got upset and stormed off. All of a sudden my father-in-law stormed off after her up the stairs. He yells so loud to her, "You are so disrespectful. You're being a spoiled brat." We hear him slam her against the wall, then more slamming and door slamming. Her husband gets in his face and says to stop and to calm down. He was in the other room and had no clue what was happening. My mother-in-law is struggling to get up the stairs to stop him. I'm holding my husband back from getting involved. He's the oldest and it's not his actual father. My father-in-law runs out the front door and slams it on his way out, jumps in his truck and speeds off. We didn't see him for the rest of the day. My mother-in-law was so embarrassed and obviously upset and just starts crying hysterically, just saying sorry over and over again. I'm glad my mom was there to comfort her. You could cut the tension in the air with a knife, obviously. I mean, the house was full of like 25 people. It's been difficult to convince my mom to return again since 7 or 8 years ago when that happened. He apparently found God and it helped his anger. He's still a shit human. My uncle passed away of a heart attack. He was my dad's best friend, and we were at his cousin's house. Thanksgiving is still kinda rough, to be honest. We're getting through it, but it was 5 years ago now and it still doesn't feel all the way normal. I had a grandmother pass away on Thanksgiving. It's been several years, so it's much better now than it was the first few years after, but it is hard. I wish your family healing and happiness. I have a really big family that gets together for the holidays. The kids used to pull pranks on the adults during Thanksgiving every year. One year we got a dummy and dressed it in my cousin's clothes. There are huge windows in the dining room of my aunt's house, where we had Thanksgiving. We pushed the dummy out the window accompanied with some theatrical screams, and all the adults went fucking nuts thinking my cousin actually fell out the window, like jumping out of their seats or running outside to help. It was our last good prank and damn was it funny. Thanksgiving at my dad's close friend's house. Dad's friend Dino has a new fiance. Dino also has a new Doberman Pinscher Iker. So Dino's fiance gives Iker a bunch of leftover turkey from dinner. Ika has a bad reaction to the turkey, gets the shits and is literally running around their apartment shooting shit from its dog ass everywhere. Fiance bawling uncontrollably. I was 5. I will never forget that turkey day. I turned off Christmas music so my dad threw me onto the ground and threatened to throw a chair at me. My mom was balancing a small cutting board on the edge of the kitchen sink while cutting sweet potatoes for dinner. The board tipped. The knife slipped and went right into the back of her thumb, visibly stopping in the bone. We were in a tiny mountain town in Montana. The roads were icy hell, and the nearest doctor was 65 miles away over a mountain pass. We waited 4 hours, starving and bored, while her BF drove her there. Dinner was finally served around midnight. We had to cut mom's food for her. Luckily her thumb healed just fine. Thanksgiving always happens at my grandma's house with everyone in the family going over to eat. One of my aunts, we'll call her Beth, used to live with my grandma. During the day Aunt Beth went to the store to grab something. My other aunt, we'll call her Judy, had arrived in the meantime and had parked in the driveway. We were all sitting down to eat when Aunt Beth got back from the store. She stormed into the kitchen and started yelling at Aunt Judy about parking in the driveway because Aunt Beth lived there, so that was her parking spot. After a few minutes of screaming back and forth at each other, Aunt Judy reaches down to the kitchen table, picks up my sister's full plate of Thanksgiving dinner and slams it into Aunt Beth's face. Everything after that was a blur because my sister and I were being hauled out of the kitchen by my mom while the husbands tried to defuse the situation. The only thing that I remember after that was my Aunt Beth sitting on the back porch with her husband crying and picking mashed potatoes out of her hair. TLDR. Aunt started a Thanksgiving food fight over a parking spot in the driveway. When my cousin Becky was 19, she went through a crazy phase. She got tons of tattoos and had everything pierced. Her eyebrows, lips, tongue, belly button, etc. I'm also pretty sure she got into some drugs. Then she announced that she was a lesbian. On Thanksgiving Day, Becky showed up an hour late, blistering drunk, with her new girlfriend, to my elderly, super religious, southern grandparents' house. Her girlfriend was a 37-year-old stripper with a meth problem. She brought this complete stranger over without telling anyone. The girlfriend had a huge tramp stamp of stars above her ass and a bright pink thong that was whale-tailing out of her jeans. Within 15 minutes of being there, she was caught rifling through the medicine cabinet in the bathroom. My dad and uncles flipped out and kicked them both out of the house, absolutely chewing my cousin out the whole time. It's such a trashy and weird memory to think back on. Becky is now piercing free, employed, and happily married with 2 kids. I have nothing against piercings, just emphasizing how she changed her look. Thanksgiving back in 1998. I was 8 years old and my wealthy grandparents decided to take the whole family to Maui for the week. This included our 5-person family and around 15 extended family members. All was great until Thanksgiving dinner. My older cousin started bickering, which turned into a pretty big altercation and some food throwing. 8-year-old me out is loving it up until the uncles get involved. My 18-year-old male cousin, who was a total asswipe, starts freaking out at my 15-year-old female cousin and calling her a whore for reasons unbeknownst to me. At this point, female cousin's dad comes flying over and punches his nephew so hard that literally is thrown a few feet and nearly knocked out. Now the other uncle has to defend his son, which results in a few punches between those two until my family can separate them. There will never be a better Thanksgiving dinner in my life, though my grandparents have yet to take us on another vacation since. When I was about 8, My mom made little pilgrims and Indians with everyone's faces on them, and she worked really hard on them. They were pretty cool, too. Well, my sister was watching TV and I wanted to change the channel. She was rude and denied my request. Now 8-year-old Dreddy Dread was a little shit. So I took a Sharpie and drew a mustache on her pilgrim's face. My mother was not pleased and I got to stand in the corner. Thanksgiving at Grandma's. I'm at the kiddie table, of course, for the main meal. I believe there's 14 of us. My mother made this chocolate mousse that incorporated Reese's Cups, miniatures, a bit like this peanut butter chocolate mousse cake that Skinny Chicken Bake webpage, but not exactly that, and it went over really well. My aunt had brought over a dessert as well and finally said no one's touching my dessert. My uncle, her husband, dove for that shit like it was gold and stopped eating my mother's Reese's mousse, but he came back for it later. We delayed eating dinner because our neighbors were having a heated and aggressive argument outside in the street. My mom discreetly watched. She said she was making sure nobody got hurt, but it was clear she was just enjoying the show. My dad called the cops when the argument turned into a full-on fight. My brothers and I watched from an upstairs window, and then as soon as it was done, we had dinner. It was great entertainment. My crazy sister-in-law made some comment to my crazy brother-in-law that apparently set him off. He threw a chair across dining room in an effort to get his hands on her. The chair flies through the plate glass sliding patio door and goes onto the deck. Sol grabs a butcher knife off the counter in the kitchen and tries to stick it in Bill's stomach. So he's trying to get an angle on her, and she's trying to cut him. Everyone else is frozen in complete shock, as this happened in about 4 seconds. After a bunch of screaming and threats of the police being called, Bill takes his family and leaves. My then 4-year-old came from a back bedroom and saw the standoff and started crying. The look in his eyes still haunts me. We had put up with the crazy family in our life since we'd gotten married. And at that time it was 16 years. This was the final straw after years of mental and physical violence from the nut jobs. We've since broken all contact with the crazy people. Been 4 years now and our life is so much better now. They do still randomly text or email us from anonymous accounts with idle threats or trying to shame us for not forgiving the family like a normal person would. But we've contacted law enforcement and let them know in case they try something. Don't let crazy people ruin your life just because they're family. A good family shouldn't be a constant source of pain and suffering. Your family, being yourself, your significant other, and your kids, is the family that should be taken care of first. Extended family don't get to mess with or hurt that family. Took us a long time to realize that. Mom invited a suicidal person into our house, and he tried to commit suicide, but the turkey was ready and he was really hungry. So that was the first and last time Mom did that. The guy had slit his wrist, but when he heard that the turkey was ready he regretted it and bandaged himself up. Never heard or saw that man again. On the plus side, your mother can now claim her turkey prevents suicide. My grown 20-something sister, brother, and I, and with a colleague from work of mine who has become good friends with and was currently my roommate, were playing Monopoly. My little sister was pretty drunk and going on about how dumb she thought my boyfriend, who was not there, looked. I let it go, but it was one of those things where she was like insisting on a laugh even though it wasn't funny, and to save face she wasn't going to be so until someone laughed. No one was laughing. Finally there was a pause in her banter as my friend played his turn and something happened in the game. I seized the moment to whisper discreetly, in your way, please stop. You're being annoying. At first everything went great. She STFU and the game continued on. No one even noticed the whisper. About 5 or 10 minutes later she burst into tears. When asked why, she just insisted on giving everyone her Monopoly money. I didn't even put 2 and 2 together. What I did want very mean. Especially considering she was insulting my boyfriend and no one even noticed me saying anything, and this was considered time later. I imagined it had to be something else and she ran out of the room sobbing. TBF, we'd all been drinking and we were all like, that was weird, but after a few minutes of WTF happened we were like, meh, she was being annoying, let's just play. Only be about 10 minutes later my mother came down absolutely furious. Red-faced, white knuckles, angry, demanding I apologize to my sister for being cruel. Say what? She told everyone I told her to shut the fuck up in front of everyone, and she said I called her a dumb bitch. Like, I just said STFU, you dumb bitch, in front of my coworker. I came upstairs and the entire family was living, hollering about what a horrible person I am and how I should be ashamed of myself. I tried to say I didn't do it. My brother and friend vouched for me, but they still insisted I apologize. Did I mention we were all in our 20s? I was almost 30. Later she apologized for the lie. By later I mean several years later. But as a result I was annexed from the table at Thanksgiving and chastised the entire night. We no longer play Monopoly. Family has a huge ranch in PA where we have a sort of Thanksgiving family reunion every year. One year, my cousin brought his new girlfriend. Same cousin's little brother came home on leave from the Marines for the reunion. Older bro, W the GF, was running errands when little bro arrived. Little bro proceeds to meet his big bros new GF, hits it off, and they, apparently, go to the barn and bang out a quickie. Keep in mind, at this point, little bro and the GF had no idea their relationship to one another hinged on big bro. Complete strangers at that point. Well, later in the night, after drinking and merriment has been made, drunk Marine little bro confesses that he bent his big bros girl over a bale of hay in the barn. All hell broke loose and it was probably the most entertaining Thanksgiving I have ever attended. At the end of the day, though, big bro thanked little bro. He said, I'd rather she cheat on me with you, and I found out now than after we've been together for a while. He figured if she'd cheat at his family reunion then she will cheat anywhere at any time. All's well that ends well. OMG, I actually have an answer for this. So my stepmom at the time was a control freak. She called me one day to yell at me, so I slammed my flip phone shut. The night before Thanksgiving is when this all went down. When my grandma brought me home that night, she witnessed my stepmom trying to take my phone away from me. Something flipped a switch on my grandma and she started arguing with my stepmom. She started walking towards her yelling that if she was going to be mad about me not answering my phone, my stepmom better make sure to answer her phone every time. Long story short, my grandma literally threw my stepmom up against the wall and choked my stepmom out. Greatest day of my life. Long rant ahead. Cousins came over. Their parents are divorced, so they come every other year. Same with my other set of cousins on the other side of the family. The cousin that did said incident was 13 or 14 at the time. I can't remember, but she's also the golden child in her mum's eyes. Every other year, my little sister and I sit in the basement with our cousins, all around my age, except for golden child, who's slightly older than my little sister. While my cousins were typically being obnoxious, golden child ups the antics by flinging mashed potatoes at my other cousin, then proceeds to keep flinging them at the wall. A few bread rolls are thrown before I get them to stop. I was dealing heavily with eating disorders, depression, and anxiety, so I decide to go on a walk. Of course, all 5 of my cousins decide to go with me, including my little sister. So the walk is going to have the opposite effect of what I wanted. Great. Whatever. Well, we see a dead bat on the sidewalk. Not being a total fucking idiot, I don't touch the dead bird and just walk around it, like a normal human being. No, we can't have normal here. Golden Child thinks it would be funner to pick up the dead bird, hide it behind her back, and plan to throw it at one of us. Who the fuck does that? I turn and yell at her to drop the dead bat on the ground, to not touch anything else until she washes her hands, and keep walking. So what does she do? She starts asking her sisters if she should grab my hat off my head. My little sister hears this, whispers to me her intentions, and I'm really not having this now. I whipped around so fast that I think I gave myself whiplash. I told her if she fucking touches my hat with her fucking grimy hands, there will be hell to pay. I told her that what she did was disgusting and that if she so much as touches me, I'll break her fucking hands. Yes, I know it was a bit harsh, and mental illness is no excuse, but mental illness during holidays, especially with people I can't stand, even if they are family, and so many of them in my safe space all at once, it's a bit much for me. I'm much better now, but that day, oh my god. I was so done with her shit that I refused to talk to anyone but my dad for the rest of the night. One year, two of my cousins and myself took it upon ourselves to be in charge of supplying the booze or our family dinner. It's typically just a serve yourself buffet style dinner as our Mexican family is very big. Well, while at the store, one of my cousins saw the Sailor Jerry and said, "I love this shit. I could down a whole bottle myself." I immediately called him on his bullshit, but he wouldn't back down. You can probably see where this is going. Things escalated to the point where all three of us made a gentleman's agreement YouTube webpage that we would each finish a bottle of hard liquor each. Cousin 1 stuck with Sailor, while cousin 2 and I each went with a bottle of vodka. We all started pretty strong, but about a quarter into his bottle of Sailor Jerry, cousin 1 crawled off to bed and passed out, and then there were 2. At about 3/4 I had a slight lead, but that's where things got hazy. From what I was told the next morning by my mom, I was determined to finish, but we had run out mixers, so I just went with vodka waters to finish it off. In first place, by the way, with cousin 2 finishing just behind me. While in our drunken stupor, we managed to get a game of 5-card draw started with some uncles, and I also somehow got my mom, who never gambles, to join. To wrap up the tales of the previous day's shenanigans, my mom tells me I had somehow cheated while dealing poker to have her win like $50. But she didn't want that dirty money, so she tossed it at me in bed. All in all, a good night that still gets brought up every year since. Oh, and to top it off, cousin 2 woke up at 6 AM to head to Vegas the next morning for a weekend of even more drinking. Don't know how he survived that. My mom and aunt took my blind sister outside and had a distant relative pray for her. My sister does not like to be prayed for. It was not consensual. Me and another Italian exchange student were staying in same family. The Italian guy flipped one of the host brothers off and they almost fought. Needless to say, we both moved out of that family. Sorry for the bad English. The people who apologize for their English are never the people who need to apologize for their English. Like 15 years ago, my overweight aunt missed her chair and she slammed into the wall. She put massive butt cheek indents where she hit up the drywall. To this day it's the funniest thing I've ever witnessed. Big old cheek indents. She was so embarrassed. We took pictures after she left. In 2008, my cousin demanded to know how I was going to fix liberal bias in the media. I was a sophomore in college, minoring in journalism. When my grandpa was 3, his parents and his brothers were killed by a drunk driver. Later on, many years later that is, they saw a psychic and they said the killer would be found on Thanksgiving. Thanksgiving rolls around that year and we aren't even thinking about it. Well, we get a call during dinner that the killer had been found in Mexico. Thanksgiving 2016 was spent in hospice with my son. He died 4 days later. A bunch of our neighbor's hounds just burst into our kitchen and ate our turkey. My dad tried to wrestle it away but they bested him. Later that day, after we accepted what had happened, we decided to go out for duck. Wow, there are some pretty great stories here. I am personally trying to read all of them. Unfortunately, like most Reddit posts, a lot of great stories will be buried. If you sort the comments by new, I promise you will enjoy the awesome buried content. My grandma made a comment somewhere along the lines of how I should never date a black guy or something like that. So since that was obviously a very racist comment, I decided to call her out on it. However, I didn't just want to say grandma you're being racist, I wanted her to figure out she was being racist for herself. So I just asked her why would it be terrible if I dated a black guy, and she fumbled over some sort of excuse about how that would make life difficult for me, and I just kept asking why. Keep in mind I was being very calm and not raising my voice at all. Basically I was leading her to have to say the real reason she wouldn't want that is because she feels that black people are lesser. And when she realized that, she started getting upset and mad at me. Then my aunt randomly joined in and started yelling at me for making my grandma upset, and then my cousin screams at me, "Thank you for ruining Thanksgiving," and runs off to her room and slams the door. TLDR. Calmly got my grandma to realize she was being racist and then got yelled at by half my family, and apparently I was the one who ruined Thanksgiving.